Chapter 84. The reason for all of this. It was because after a year, once the specially recruited quota was decided, everyone would leave, regardless of whether they obtained it or not. They came here for the specially recruited quota. They had no interest in a Grade 3 life planet branch in the first place. Therefore, these people knew the school's attitude towards them. It was also because of this reason that they did not look for trouble. However, after hearing Zhao Kuen's words today, these people seemed to know that cultivation was finally about to begin. The students who entered this place normally all had excited expressions on their faces. However, the disciples of the aristocratic families were still the same. They were not very excited. After all, these people were at least intermediate psychic masters and above. They did not think that the cultivation method taught by the Federal University would be better than the cultivation method taught by their families. Zhao Kuen glanced around and captured the expressions of all the students in his eyes. He revealed a look of understanding. However, when he finally looked at a corner, he revealed a strange expression. The person he was looking at was Lu Feng. Zhao Kuen was already very familiar with Lu Feng. After all, this was their hope to prove themselves in the future. Although he did not know why Lu Feng had to choose a psychic major, he paid more attention to Lu Feng because of the headmaster and Dean Wan's greeting. He coughed lightly, and the chaotic atmosphere instantly calmed down. Zhao Kuen returned to his usual indifference and said, "From today onwards, our study of the history and general knowledge of psychics will end here. Next, we will begin the real study of psychics. Those who are specially recruited are at least beginner psychic masters. You all have your own cultivation methods before this. Therefore, I don't need to say much about this cultivation method. If there is anyone who does not understand, you can look for me after class. I will give you special guidance." After saying this, Zhao Kuen did not care about the reactions of the students below. He directly stepped in front of a device beside him. Everyone's gaze followed Zhao Kuen's movement and shifted to the device. Zhao Kuen pointed at the device in front of him and said with a smile, "A few days ago, when I introduced the history of psychics, I introduced these devices to you. Today, the content we're going to learn will require the use of this instrument." Hearing Zhao Kuen's words, the people below once again became slightly restless. This time, even the children of some aristocratic families were the same. There were only a few people who could maintain their composure, and Lu Feng was one of them. Actually, the main reason why he could be so indifferent was that Lu Feng didn't understand by the time he arrived. He had already talked about these things. If this was a device used by warriors, Lu Feng might be able to make some guesses. However, this was a psychic's device. Other than a few devices, Lu Feng knew nothing about most of them. It was also for this reason that Lu Feng just stood there and didn't show anything. Zhao Kuen stretched out his hand and once again calmed the slight disturbance. He reached out and gently touched the instrument in front of him, then said, "Many students should have guessed it. That's right, what we're going to learn today is the mind-splitting technique." At this moment, even Lu Feng revealed a strange expression. As a psychic, how could Lu Feng not know about the mind-splitting technique? In his impression, the mind-splitting technique should be something that only sophomores or juniors could learn. But why did they have to start learning now? However, Lu Feng was only slightly surprised. There was absolutely no meaning to it. After all, the mind-splitting technique was too important. The mind-splitting technique, as the name suggested, was to split one's mind power into several parts so that one could perform separate operations. This was a necessary foundation for a psychic. Only by mastering the mind-splitting technique could one truly control mechas and battleships. It was the Federation's ultimate deterrent weapon, the interstellar fortress. Lu Feng had wanted to learn the mind-splitting technique for a long time. Unfortunately, his family didn't allow it at the moment. Although he could be considered to be from a wealthy family, the price of buying a mind diverter was too high. It couldn't be bought without a few billion. Therefore, when he heard that Zhao Kuen was going to teach the mind-splitting technique, even Lu Feng's state of mind was stirred up quite a bit. Looking at everyone's expressions, Zhao Kuen was still smiling. He slowly swept his gaze across the crowd, and only after the crowd had quieted down did he finally speak again. Mind-splitting technique is the foundation of a psychic. It is the most basic skill for a psychic to become the main force in a war. It can be said that if a psychic can't even perform the mind-splitting technique, then he doesn't deserve to be a psychic. This was the real truth. No one could refute it, and no one could refute it. Everyone knows that the higher the level of the psychic, the more mind-splitting technique there will be. This is the basic law. However, most of you probably don't know the reason behind it. Mind-splitting technique is to split the mind power of a psychic into countless mind bodies controlled by the main body. Then, these mind bodies will complete the necessary coordination work. The number of mind bodies that can be split in one mind-splitting technique is not fixed. A high-level psychic has a very high amount of mind power. An average high-level psychic at the peak can achieve 999 mind-splitting technique. In other words, they can split at least 999 mind bodies. However, if they can only split 999 mind bodies, then I can tell you very responsibly that such a high-level psychic is a piece of trash. The mind bodies are an extension of the psychic's soul. Their strength is only related to the main body, which is the psychic himself. It has nothing to do with the strength of the mind bodies. In other words, the same main body can split one mind-splitting technique into 10, and one can only split into 1. Although their strengths are different, their effects are the same. Many people took out their recording tools and started recording. Lu Feng did the same. Although he had become a psychic, he didn't know much about psychic things. He was far less knowledgeable than a warrior. It was Lu Feng's first time hearing these things, so he was recording them carefully. The number of mind bodies directly determines the level of technological weapons a psychic can control. For example, if both of them are high-level psychics with 100 mind-splitting technique, the more talented one can split each mind body into 3, then his mind body will be 300. The less talented one can only split one mind body, then his mind body will be 100. The standard to operate a mid-level warship is 100 mind bodies. In other words, the more talented one can operate 3 mid-level warships at most. The less talented one can only operate 1. Also, 2 high-level psychics can operate a mid-level warship at the same time. However, the more talented one can use 300 mind bodies to operate the warship. In terms of agility, combat ability, and coordination, this mid-level warship will far surpass the high-level psychic with 100 mind bodies. It can be said that the number of mind bodies directly determines the quality and quantity of technological weapons a psychic can control. Lu Feng nodded lightly. With such an example, he could understand it very well. There are 2 main factors that determine the number of mind bodies a psychic can have. The first is the psychic's level. No matter how useless a high-level psychic is, he can split at least 100 mind bodies. However, no matter how talented a beginner psychic is, can he split 50 mind bodies? Therefore, the first factor that determines the number of mind bodies a psychic can have is the psychic's level. After coughing lightly, Zhao Kun looked at the students who were taking notes attentively and revealed a gratified expression. If the first factor is to test the psychic's diligence and cultivation, then the second factor is to test the psychic's talent. The more talented one can split one mind body into many mind bodies, while the less talented one can only split one mind body. Although the number of mind bodies divided is different, the strength of the mind bodies is not much different. Just as I said before, although the strength of one mind body divided into 10 mind bodies and one mind body divided into one mind body divided into 10 mind bodies, there is no difference in the strength of the 10 mind bodies. The same high-level psychic with 100 mind bodies may have different numbers of mind bodies, but in terms of strength, they are exactly the same. This is because the mother body of these mind bodies is also the psychic, so their mind bodies are of the same level. Therefore, the more talented psychic not only has a faster cultivation speed, but also a higher level in combat. In terms of controlling technological weapons, they are also far ahead. Hearing this, many people fell silent. In the past, many people had said that hard work could make up for the lack of talent. However, now it seemed that hard work could not make up for everything. The aspect of spiritual diversion was a very clear example. However, these students were not too disheartened. After all, Talent was not something they could decide. All right, next, let's try mind splitting. After saying this, Zhao Kuan told the students to find a mental energy splitting device and try it out. He was in charge of guiding them. Lu Feng was no exception. He also yearned for mind splitting. However, Lu Feng also knew that his talent was not very good. Therefore, this time, Lu Feng did not have much confidence. Looking at the device in front of him, Lu Feng hesitated slightly. He did not know how to use it. However, at this moment, a clear and beautiful voice sounded beside him. Turn on the switch of the device, and a three-dimensional image will appear. After selecting Mind Connection, try to establish a connection with the device, and you can use it. Chapter 85. The person who spoke was Mu Shuyan. At this moment, she was standing in front of a device beside Lu Feng, smiling at Lu Feng. Seeing this, Lu Feng also returned a grateful smile. Then, he followed Mu Shuyan's method and began his mind diversion exercise. It was just as Mu Shuyan had said. Soon, Lu Feng entered the selection page. This time, Lu Feng separated his mind power and connected it to the crystal. In an instant, Lu Feng felt a sense of connection. Then, he realized that his mind power seemed to have entered deep into a space. It was a virtual space. It was pitch black inside, but he could see everything clearly. In this pitch black yet bright virtual space, it was not absolutely empty. Inside, there were countless balls of light floating quietly in midair. In the next moment, an explanation suddenly appeared in front of Lu Feng. And this explanation was the specific method of using the mind-diverting device. It didn't take long for Lu Feng to finish reading the explanation. He clicked the close button. Lu Feng did not immediately start the experiment. Instead, he pondered for a moment. Soon, Lu Feng seemed to have understood something. He smiled slightly and finally began his first mind diversion device. According to the numbers on the display next to him, Lu Feng extracted a concentration of his mind power and tried to place this concentration of mind power on the balls of light in front of him. Soon, the connection was established. At this moment, Lu Feng felt as if he was the light spot. An indescribable connection was established between the two of them. Lu Feng knew that this was guiding mind power. He was not very surprised by this because Lu Feng had once touched it in the Psychic Guild Hall on the Sky Network. At that time, he was undergoing a mind development index test. The difference was that there were two small balls that appeared at that time. Lu Feng felt that the small balls were harder to touch and control than the balls of light in front of him. After getting used to it, Lu Feng began to try his own mind dissociation. Actually, at this moment, Lu Feng was extremely nervous. Previously, when Lu Feng had become a psychic master, he had gone to the Psychic Guild Hall to take the test. At that time, he had realized that a random child's talent development index, which was also a psychic master's aptitude, had far surpassed his own. Lu Feng had been very shocked at that time. From then on, he had believed that his psychic master's aptitude was very poor. Now, he was worried that he would really be like what teacher Zhao Kuan had said, where he could only form one mind power. If that was the case, Lu Feng would be labeled as a good-for-nothing once again. However, Lu Feng realized that the result didn't seem to be what he thought it would be after the spiritual diversion started. Because of this, of course of mind dissociation of his mind, had mind as seeing this scene, Lu Feng let out a long sigh of relief. His expression was one of joy. For him, it was enough to not become a good-for-nothing. After all, in Lu Feng's heart, being a warrior was the direction he should move forward in. No matter how strong a psychic master was, he was just a support. He was now in a hurry to cultivate as a psychic master because he wanted to become a psychic master so that he could try to comprehend the contents of the pill mantra. The two mind bodies connected to the two balls of light. Lu Feng had a strange feeling at that moment. It was the feeling of having three visions. The first one was the vision of his main body, while the other two came from the two spiritual bodies. This feeling was very strange and trendy. The two independent mind bodies gave Lu Feng a very special feeling. It was as if they were a part of his body, just like his arms and legs. He only needed to think a little, and he could do what he needed to do. Sure enough, after giving them an order, Lu Feng knew that his guess was right. The two mind bodies began to move according to the thoughts Lu Feng gave them, following different trajectories. Soon, Lu Feng stopped, because Lu Feng still wanted to give it a try. According to his teacher, once the mind dissociation reached its limit, the soul would feel the existence of its limit and automatically stop, unable to continue. However, at that moment, Lu Feng did not feel tired at all. Therefore, Lu Feng still wanted to give it a try. It was another mind dissociation. This time, Lu Feng only dissociated one of the mind bodies. Soon, under Lu Feng's joyful gaze, the mind dissociation was successful. 3. It was already 3. At that moment, Lu Feng felt unusually happy. Although he did not know if mind dissociation was a good result or not, it was clearly out of the category of good for nothing. Previously, when Zhao Kuan was explaining, he used a mind dissociation that could be dissociated into 3 parts. Obviously, this was not a bad result. I didn't expect that I would have talent in this area. Now that I feel that my limit has not yet arrived, let's try again. Thinking of this, Lu Feng finally tried the 4th mind dissociation after getting used to the 3rd mind dissociation. When the 4th mind body appeared, Lu Feng's expression had already calmed down. There was a look of ecstasy in his eyes. However, Lu Feng was also calm, although he did not know the standard. However, Lu Feng could also guess that dividing the first condensation into 4 parts should be considered a very good result. However, this result did not seem right to Lu Feng. Previously, Zhao Kuan had said that the number of mind dissociation had nothing to do with one's aptitude. Yet, he could actually do this. Could it be that his talent was not as bad as he thought? Taking a deep breath, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of a problem at that moment. That was, until now, he did not understand the psychic system at all. Back then, his talent development quotient was 2.4, but until now, Lu Feng did not know what this 2.4 meant. After a moment of silence, Lu Feng finally made up his mind. When he had time after this incident, he would definitely investigate what this 2.4 meant. Soon, Lu Feng was finally familiar with the existence of the 4 mind bodies. At that moment, Lu Feng was also planning to try the 4th mind dissociation. Lu Feng could clearly feel that his limit had not yet arrived. Although it was close, it had not really arrived yet. He felt that he could dissociate another mind body. Taking a deep breath, Lu Feng focused his attention on a mind body. Slowly, Lu Feng was about to begin the 4th mind dissociation. However, the moment Lu Feng saw that he was about to succeed, he suddenly felt a strange feeling. In an instant, Lu Feng stopped the 4th mind dissociation. Then, in an instant, Lu Feng withdrew and left the training. On the altar of the ancient Feng clan, Lu Feng had experienced 9 lives. In addition to the opening of the god's domain and his incomparably strong willpower, his perception of the outside world had also reached an unimaginable level. Just a moment ago, when he was about to start the 4th mind dissociation to produce the 5th mind body, he suddenly felt like he was being watched. One had to know that Lu Feng had too many secrets. Although he could feel that the mind dissociation had not been malicious, he had not expected this. However, Lu Feng did not dare think that way. He did not want any of his secrets to be known by others. Therefore, at the last moment, Lu Feng decisively stopped and withdrew. After disconnecting, Lu Feng quickly looked around. However, he did not see anyone strange around him. The students around him, regardless of whether it was Mu Shuiyin or Su Wenchao, who was further away, or the other students, were all immersed in the mind dissociation training. They did not withdraw from the mind dissociation device. After scanning a few more times, Lu Feng still did not discover anyone. At this moment, Lu Feng was slightly silent. Finally, he entered the state of training once again. However, Lu Feng, who had entered the mind-splitting device, did not attempt to split his mind for the 4th time. Although he did not find the source, Lu Feng believed in his own intuition. He firmly believed that someone must have been spying on him just now. So at this time, although he was still training, Lu Feng didn't try anything. Lu Feng did not notice that after he re-entered the mind dissociation device, a figure walked out from beside him. He was Lu Feng's teacher, Zhao Kuan. Zhao Kun looked at Lu Feng with a complicated expression and exhaled deeply. What a terrifying innate talent. Doesn't Lu Feng have an unparalleled innate talent on the path of a warrior? Why is it that his cultivation as a psychic is even more terrifying? A beginner psychic can actually divide one's mind power into 4 parts. This means that when he was a beginner psychic, his mind development quotient was already above 4.0. This means that his innate talent development quotient is at least 2.0. Zhao Kun was horrified. At this moment, he did not know what to say. Lu Feng did not know what a talent development quotient above 2.0 meant, but he knew. It meant that someone with such a development quotient was a genius, an absolutely terrifying, peerless genius. Perhaps the word genius could no longer be used to describe him. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Finally, Zhao Kun came back to his senses. He immediately woke up everyone who was still in the midst of training. As he watched the students wake up one by one from their training, Zhao Kun tried his best to maintain his original appearance. But unconsciously, the slight trembling of his body had already exposed his incomparably complicated emotions. All the students looked at Zhao Kun, but Zhao Kun only took a deep breath. He said, "Students, I have some urgent matters to attend to today. Train well here in the afternoon. If you need anything, send a message to the Academic Affairs Office. When it's 5 p.m., you can automatically dismiss your classes." Chapter 86. After giving out his instructions, Zhao Kun turned around and walked towards the stairway. The remaining students looked at each other in dismay. Although it wasn't a big deal for a teacher to take a leave of absence, Zhao Kun's behavior was a little too bizarre. However, these people weren't idiots. Since Zhao Kun didn't tell them what was going on, they naturally wouldn't ask about it. After a brief discussion, they stopped paying attention to it. All the students once again immersed themselves in their training. Finally, the only one who remained sober in the entire training ground was Lu Feng. Looking in the direction that Zhao Kun left in, Lu Feng's extremely silent eyes flickered continuously. He was thinking about something. Finally, as if he had thought of the reason, Lu Feng's eyes finally flashed with a strange light. The spiritual power that was probing me previously should have been Teacher Zhao's. It seems that it's normal for teachers to be able to see the situation of us splitting up here. Lu Feng's guess was right. This was because every student's aptitude was different. Therefore, when teaching, the teacher needed to control the progress of every student to be able to formulate a corresponding learning schedule. And it was precisely because of this reason that every instrument here was firmly controlled by the teachers. But why did he leave? Could it really be related to me? Zhao Kun left after discovering that he was being observed. Moreover, when he left, Zhao Kun vaguely looked at him with a complicated gaze, which made Lu Feng feel that this matter seemed to be related to him. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. Lu Feng shrugged helplessly and continued to immerse himself in his training. He knew that if Zhao Kun wanted to harm him, he had countless ways to do so. He was at least at the level of a spiritual psyche master. A psyche master of this level was not much different from a warrior of the same level in terms of individual combat power. If he wanted to kill him, it would be a matter of a thought. Therefore, Lu Feng had nothing to be afraid of. Gradually, Lu Feng finally immersed himself in his training again. Heavens, Zhao Kun rushed into the principal's office, even forgetting to knock on the door to announce his arrival. Looking at Zhao Kun's complicated expression that was completely different from his usual self, the principal was slightly taken aback. Then, he revealed a smile. He stretched out his hand and gestured for Zhao Kun to sit down. "Zhao Kun, what's wrong with you today? You're completely different from your usual self. Don't tell me that you've switched to a berserk-type cultivation method?" Hearing the principal's teasing, Zhao Kun seemed to have realized his inappropriate behavior. He smiled embarrassedly and sat on the seat the principal pointed to. Zhao Kun looked at the indifferent principal in front of him and thought about how he usually took care of him. He also thought about the treatment they received in the Federal University. At this moment, Zhao Kun's emotions, which had just calmed down, were once again agitated. Heavens, this time, we're finally going to make a comeback. We can finally prove ourselves. Looking at Zhao Kuan's excited expression, Li Tianlai finally realized what had happened. He and Zhao Kuan were both psychics. In terms of cultivation, he was a level higher than Zhao Kuan, who was a psychic. Li Tianlai was already a Pinnacle Wang psychic master. He was even a Pinnacle Wang psychic master who had comprehended divine power. Such an existence was a terrifying existence in the entire Federation. This meant that as long as Li Tianlai broke through the restraints in his heart, he would be able to take the final step and become a supreme existence revered by the entire Federation, a god. Li Tianlai left his seat and personally poured a glass of water for Zhao Kuan. Then, he said slowly, "Zhao Kuan, don't get too excited. This isn't good for your mental state." Zhao Kuan's cultivation method was the definition of a psychic. It was the kind of feeling that belonged to the quiet void. The power and cultivation method he controlled was the wind. Such agitated emotions weren't beneficial to his cultivation at all. When he heard Li Tianlai's words, Zhao Kuan should have calmed down. However, when he thought about the terrifying talent that Lu Feng had displayed, he forgot everything. Heavens, my senior brother, my esteemed principal. This time we've struck it rich. We can finally prove ourselves. He reached out his hands and danced with joy. He even stood up directly. Li Tianlai didn't do anything when he saw this. He was filled with curiosity at the moment. He knew Zhao Kuan's character very well. Something that could make Zhao Kuan so excited had to be something big. However, in the end, Li Tianlai still reached out and comforted Zhao Kuan. "Speak slowly and calm down." Zhao Kuan didn't care about this. In the next moment, he became extremely quiet. He looked at Li Tianlai with an unprecedented glow in his eyes. Heavens, I've seen a genius. I've seen a true genius. A genius? When he heard this, Li Tianlai only smiled slightly. They had seen a lot of so-called geniuses. On the capital administrative planet, any random student from the 3 great academies was a genius. At the very least, they were planet-level geniuses. Even nebula-level geniuses were more common. Li Tianlai was also a genius. Back in his generation, he had been at the peak of the geniuses. He had been a super genius at the Federation level. Although he wasn't a super genius, there were only a handful of super geniuses in the entire Federation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to reach his current level and become a demigod. When Zhao Kuan saw Li Tianlai's expression, he knew what he was thinking. Indeed, they had seen too many geniuses. Basically, the word genius could no longer attract their attention. However, it was different this time. Because of Lu Feng's talent and Lu Feng's existence, the word genius could no longer be used to describe him. When his talent development reached such a level, he could already be called a monster. Tianlai, do you still remember Lu Feng? When he heard Zhao Kuan's words, Li Tianlai paused for a moment before remembering who Lu Feng was. In an instant, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Zhao Kuan, if you're talking about Lu Feng, then you don't have to say anything else. I know that he is a genius. I heard from 1MO that Lu Feng not only has a terrifying comprehension ability, but he has also entered the battle intent realm. His cultivation speed is also very fast. With these two added together, he can almost become a nebula-level genius. Although this is very rare on the Cymbidium and is considered a top genius in the surrounding galaxies, he shouldn't be worth this much excitement. A nebula-level genius could already be considered a true genius in the Federation. However, to Li Tianlai, that was all. Li Tianlai felt that Zhao Kuan was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, when he heard this, Zhao Kuan didn't calm down at all. Tianlai, I am talking about him. You have all been deceived. He, Lu Feng, is not a genius of the warrior department. In an instant, Li Tianlai had a strange look on his face. He frowned slightly and said, "That's impossible. The subordinates reported it when they found out. There shouldn't be any problems with his comprehension ability. Moreover, 1MO had personally observed this Lu Feng before. There's no mistake about it. Could it be?" As if he had thought of something, a trace of anger appeared on his wrinkled face. He said angrily. Could it be that he colluded with those examiners? When he thought of this, Li Tianlai was really angry. A nebula-level genius couldn't attract his attention at all. As a demigod, even the geniuses of the Federation could only be considered mediocre. After all, geniuses represented potential, not strength. However, he was still angry at this moment. This was because Li Tianlai had gambled everything on this trip. Even the brothers around him had done the same. If it weren't for revenge, they wouldn't have come to such a small level 3 life planet to teach. However, now that he thought about how his hope turned out to be a scam, as a demigod, Li Tianlai couldn't help but be angry. Seeing Li Tianlai's angry look, as if he was going to leave in the next moment, Zhao Kun hurriedly reached out his hand to stop Li Tianlai. He was very clear about the strength of his senior brother, the destructive power of a demigod, especially a demigod who had cultivated a peak star-level cultivation technique, was infinitely terrifying. As long as he wanted to, even the planet under his feet could be obliterated in an instant. If he was really blinded by anger and directly used his divine mind to completely obliterate Lu Feng, then Zhao Kun would really cry. Senior brother, don't worry. It's not what you think. Don't be impulsive. Zhao Kun finally pressed Li Tianlai, who had stood up, back into his seat again. Then, he let out a long sigh of relief. He said, Tianlai, it's not what you think. Lu Feng did lie to us, but I'm willing to do this a few more times. Frowning slightly, Li Tianlai finally calmed down as he looked at Zhao Kun, who was acting very abnormally today. He knew that if Lu Feng was really a liar, he probably didn't need to do anything. Zhao Kun would solve everything for him. What's going on? Looking at Li Tianlai, who was faintly angry, Zhao Kun finally stopped being long-winded. He looked at Li Tianlai, revealing a trace of excitement mixed with a dignified expression. Tianlai, do you still remember the division of psychic geniuses in the General Hospital according to their talent? Although he didn't know why Zhao Kun was asking these questions, Li Tianlai still replied, Of course I remember. After all, you and I were also divided according to this. In the academy, those with a talent development score of only 1. Only then can they be considered geniuses. Those with a talent development score of 1, 3 and above are considered starry sky geniuses. As for those with a talent development score of 1, 4 to 1, 6, they're galactic geniuses. Only those with a talent development score of 1, 6 and above are considered Federation-level geniuses. You are an ordinary Federation-level genius with a talent development score of 1, 7, but I'm higher than you with a talent development score of 1, 8. I'm a super genius at the Federation level. However, what's wrong with that? Chapter 87. At this point, Li Tianlai didn't continue. After Zhao Kun finished listening, he nodded and said, I remember that in our batch, there were only 7 people who were able to reach 1, 9 development quotient, the Federation's level of geniuses. Hearing this, Li Tianlai nodded as well. His eyes were filled with a complicated expression. Yes, those 7 were all true geniuses. Even if they were compared to the young masters of those super clans, I'm afraid they wouldn't be any worse. Zhao Kun was silent for a moment, filled with a strange emotion. His eyes looked outside and seemed to have lost focus. After a long time, he opened his mouth and said, I heard that in our batch, the most talented person wasn't those 7 people, but him. Li Tianlai was slightly taken aback. His expression changed slightly, and he was silent at this moment. After a long time, he sighed and said slowly, So, you also know of his existence. That's right. In our batch, even among all the geniuses in the Federation, in terms of talent, he was the true number 1. However, when many geniuses were compared, he was never included. After all, in many people's eyes, he was no longer a genius. His talent development quotient had reached 0, and he had already left the category of geniuses. Such an existence couldn't be more suitable to be called a monster. Monster! He was a monster. Talent development quotient had reached 9, and that was the Federation's level of geniuses. It was the limit of geniuses defined by the Federation. breaking through 1, 9, and reaching 2, 0. That was beyond the category of geniuses. Such an existence was a monster that made all geniuses despair, a monster that they couldn't even look up to. Why did you suddenly bring him up? Looking at Zhao Kun, who walked to the window and was slightly absent-minded, Li Tianlai asked in confusion. Finally, after a long silence, Zhao Kun slowly opened his mouth. His tone was filled with an unprecedented emotion, a kind of trembling excitement. Because I realized that Lu Feng's talent level above that of psychic is also monster. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, as the bell rang, all the students woke up from their training. If it was in the past, perhaps they would have complained. After all, many people were dissatisfied with the fact that they only learned useless theoretical knowledge in the Psyche Master class. But this time, no one said anything. This was because they had gained too much today. Mind diversion was not a high-level skill, but it was a skill that every psychic had to master. No one gets tired of learning and practicing this skill. Everyone who had learned it was unusually excited. It was the same for Lu Feng. Putting down his helmet, Lu Feng took a deep breath. His expression revealed a faint excitement. After Zhao Kun left, Lu Feng finally let go completely. So much so that Lu Feng even tried to split his spiritual body. In the end, although he succeeded, Lu Feng also felt that he had reached his limit. He knew that even though he could split his spirit body into half, this was already his absolute limit. Half of his spirit body even gave him a slight feeling of mental confusion. In such a state, not to mention fighting, even being able to maintain it was an extravagant hope. Therefore, after Lu Feng confirmed that he could really split his spirit body into half, he did not continue trying. He spent the entire afternoon trying to control his spirit body. By the time the class ended, Lu Feng was already very familiar with it. Of course, he also knew that the reason for all this was inseparable from Shen Yuan. Shen Yuan's existence not only made his comprehension amazing, but also made his spirit extremely powerful. At the very least, he could easily control his spirit body. After completing all this, Lu Feng's expression was one of incomparable joy. However, he did not relax. This was because Lu Feng still remembered that he had more important things to do tonight. Wen Chao, let's go eat together. Lu Feng invited Su Wen Chao, who was walking over to him. Su Wen Chao nodded his head gently. This time, he did not say much, and his expression was slightly dispirited. This afternoon's training had made Su Wen Chao, an intermediate and advanced psychic, feel strained. Lu Feng, let's hurry up and eat. After eating, I want to have a good sleep. Damn it. Who would have thought that this spirit-splitting cultivation would consume so much of my spirit power? Even with my spirit power, it's starting to feel unbearable. After saying this, Su Wen Chao was about to leave, but a moment later, he seemed to have thought of something. His wretched little eyes kept moving around, looking Lu Feng up and down for a while. Then he clicked his tongue and said, Honestly, Lu Feng, have you been slacking off? You didn't train for the whole afternoon. Why do I see that you're completely fine? Hearing this, Lu Feng was slightly stunned. He smiled and said to Su Wen Chao, I told you, I'm a genius. How can a genius be compared to an ordinary person like you? Su Wen Chao pursed his lips. He confirmed his previous thoughts and looked disdainfully at Lu Feng. Even if you're a genius, this young master has broken through to become an intermediate and advanced psychic. In front of a great genius like me, you'd better restrain yourself. After saying this, Su Wen Chao raised his head and puffed out his chest. He directly walked past Lu Feng haughtily. Looking at Su Wen Chao's appearance, Lu Feng shrugged helplessly and followed Su Wen Chao outside. However, before Lu Feng had taken more than a few steps, Mu Xian, who was beside him, suddenly opened her mouth. Lu Feng, wait a minute. Hearing this crisp voice, Lu Feng was not the only one who stopped. Almost everyone was drawn over. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng frowned slightly. Perhaps it was because he had too many secrets, but Lu Feng really didn't like the feeling of being the center of attention. He turned to look at Mu Xian and asked, Classmate Mu Xian, what's the matter? Hearing Lu Feng's slightly displeased voice, Mu Shuyan was also stunned. There was a trace of grievance on her face, but after a moment, this expression was deeply hidden by her. Taking a light breath, Mu Shuyan put on a smiling face again. Classmate Lu Feng, since it's dinner time, let's eat together. Silence, incomparable silence. The place, which was originally chaotic and full of complaints and discussions, was instantly filled with an absolute silence. Everyone looked at Mu Shuyan strangely, and then looked at Lu Feng in front of her. An indescribable atmosphere appeared. Lu Feng was a little confused. He looked around and found that even his roommate, Su Wenchao, had the same expression. After thinking for a while, Lu Feng finally understood the reason. He smiled slightly and glanced around. He didn't stay in front of anyone for too long, ignoring the hostile and probing gazes. After a glance, he looked at Mu Shuyan again. Classmate Mu, I have something to do tonight, so I have to go out with my roommates. Next time I'll treat you. After saying this, he pulled the confused Su Wenchao and walked directly toward the stairway. Looking at Lu Feng's back as he left, Mu Shuyan bit her lips slightly. Her expression was strange. Soon, before her best friends came over, this strange expression disappeared. Finally, looking at Lu Feng's disappearing back, Mu Shuyan smiled and said slowly in a voice that only she could hear, Lu Feng, no one can ignore my charm. You can't either. Lu Feng, this is Mu Shuyan. She's Mu Shuyan, the eldest daughter of the Mu family in the Tianyan system. Why are you running away? She's inviting you. You know, it's not just the psychic department. Many people, including the warrior department and the ordinary students, want to talk to her. But today, she invited you, and you rejected her. What are you trying to do? In the end, Su Wenchao even yelled. However, Lu Feng just smiled at this. Regarding Su Wenchao's performance, Lu Feng could also understand. After all, Mu Shuyan's charm was too great. Not to mention her family background, just her appearance and the otherworldly temperament that came with becoming a psychic were enough to make her a goddess in the school. Coupled with her talent, Lu Feng believed that her popularity in the Cymbidium branch was absolutely terrifying. Because of this, when they heard that Mu Shuyan had taken the initiative to invite Lu Feng, all the students were stunned for a moment. Then, many of them showed hostile expressions. If it had been anyone else, they would have been excited to hear this goddess invitation. But Lu Feng wasn't anyone else. When he had ascended the altar of the ancient Feng clan, Lu Feng had experienced the illusion of 9 lifetimes. His soul and temperament had been polished to the extreme. Perhaps he would admire Mu Shuyan's beauty. However, he would only admire it. When he had first seen Mu Shuyan in the Tianluo Psychic Guild Hall, Lu Feng had indeed felt his heartbeat accelerate. At that time, he had also been slightly tempted. However, when he thought of Mu Shuyan in the future, Lu Feng's mind would always have a blurry figure. However, no matter how carefully Lu Feng looked, he couldn't see the face at all. Although he couldn't remember who it was, the existence of the figure gave Lu Feng an inexplicable feeling. The owner of the figure had an indescribable importance to Lu Feng Lai. It was also because of the existence of the figure that when Lu Feng saw Mu Shuyan again, he lost the feeling he had for the first time. Of course, in addition to this, in Lu Feng's eyes, Mu Shuyan's beauty had another meaning, and that was trouble. Chapter 88. Lu Feng could imagine that if he really accepted Mu Shuyan's invitation, then he would have to face a lot of trouble the next day. For now, the most important thing for Lu Feng was to cultivate. He needed to become a psychic master as soon as possible so that he could try to become an alchemist. As for other things, Lu Feng really didn't have many thoughts. Well, Wenchao, I know myself very well. Do you think that with Mu Shuyan's identity and status, she would take a fancy to an ordinary person like me? Since there is no possibility, why should I have any involvement with her? Wouldn't this be looking for trouble for myself? Hearing Lu Feng's words, Su Wenchao also nodded unconsciously. But then he thought of something and said, but, Lu Feng pushed Su Wenchao and said, no buts. The world is big, but eating is the most important thing. Hurry up and eat. After saying this, he pulled Su Wenchao toward the cafeteria. During dinner, Qi Yunqing was also called by Lu Feng. Last night, because of him, the two of them didn't sleep well, so Lu Feng also wanted to make up for it. Therefore, in the cafeteria, Lu Feng didn't have any reluctance and directly ordered a lot of dishes according to the relatively high standards. As warriors, Qi Yunqing and Lu Feng's appetite was naturally very amazing. The food ordered was enough for 7 people, but in the end, it was completely eaten by the 3 of them. And this meal cost Lu Feng 3,000 yuan. In the school, 3,000 Federation coins was already a large number. It was the living expenses of many students for a few months. But in front of the 3 of them, it was just a matter of a meal. However, the 3 of them didn't care much about this, because the identities of these 3 people were not simple. Qi Yunqing and Su Wenchao both knew that Lu Feng was rich, so they didn't stop Lu Feng from spending more than 2,000 yuan. After eating, under the strange gazes of the 2, Lu Feng braced himself and left. Although the 2 of them were his brothers, the time they spent together was still very short. Moreover, Lu Feng didn't want to say everything about himself. He knew that keeping a low profile was the way to go. Therefore, Lu Feng's excuse was to go out for a walk. Following the path he had walked once, Lu Feng quickly arrived in front of the cultivation technique pavilion. Taking out the proof and swiping it in front of the instrument, Lu Feng walked in. Now, he had already refined more than 90 types of combat skill essences. He only needed a few more to complete the collection of 100 types of combat skill essences. At that time, Lu Feng would be able to condense a perfect combat skill essence and evolve his cultivation technique into a true intermediate cultivation technique. Following the path in his memory, Lu Feng directly came to the area with a 3-fold increase. In the morning, before he left, he had chosen a cultivation technique. There were more than 20 types of combat skill essences in that cultivation technique, which Lu Feng didn't have. Therefore, as long as he comprehended that cultivation technique, he would be able to complete his goal. Soon, Lu Fenglai arrived at the place he had left. Looking at the cultivation technique that was still lying peacefully on the table, Lu Feng let out a soft breath. In the morning, in order not to attract attention, he didn't leave with the cultivation technique and left it where it was. Although he had only left for an afternoon, the time was very short. However, Lu Feng was also worried that someone had chosen that cultivation technique. If that was the case, then his efforts in the morning would have been wasted. Now that he saw that the 3-fold cultivation technique, when Lu was still lying peacefully on the table, Lu Feng couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Actually, I'm thinking too much. When Lu is a 3-fold cultivation technique, I don't think there are many people who can comprehend it. Moreover, this cultivation technique is very obscure and difficult to understand. It belongs to an unorthodox cultivation technique. I think there should be very few people who choose it. With a slight smile, Lu Feng directly took the cultivation technique in his hands and flipped to the page he had seen previously. Then, he sank into a state of comprehension. Lu Feng didn't notice that a figure had mysteriously appeared beside him while he was in a state of comprehension. It was a middle-aged man who was filled with an aged aura. His existence was just that strange. He was clearly in the prime of his life, but the feeling he gave off was that he had already aged. At that moment, he was standing there quietly, as if he had never moved. However, for some reason, even though he clearly existed, it was as if he had never appeared. No perception could detect him. Or rather, the only way to see him was to rely on one's own eyes. The middle-aged man chuckled as he looked at Lu Feng, who was in a state of silence, and waved his hand casually. With a casual wave of his hand, a hazy radiance suddenly appeared in the area around Lu Feng. The glow disappeared in a flash. However, in the next moment, a frightening scene appeared. That was because as the light disappeared, that area also disappeared. Lu Feng sank into a state of cultivation. A 3-fold cultivation technique was indeed a 3-fold cultivation technique. Although it was only a 2-fold increase, the difficulty of comprehending it was much higher. Even with Lu Feng's current level of comprehension, it still took him a total of 6 hours to comprehend the rest of the content. By the time he woke up, it was already midnight. Looking at the time on the heavenly network, Lu Feng let out a long sigh. He extended his arm and casually drew a finger in the air. It was a finger that was endlessly quiet. However, in this finger, there was a surge of tyrannical, killing intent. Such an aura was enough to make any ordinary person tremble. Slaughter. This was the aura of slaughter. The so-called slaughter of literature was a kind of silent slaughter. This kind of cultivation technique was completely created for the purpose of killing people. Now, Lu Feng could completely control it and unleash the full potential of this cultivation technique. Although it is only a beginner cultivation technique, and it is only a threefold beginner cultivation technique, the effect of this cultivation technique is too great. If it is used for assassination, it would be no less than a fourfold or even fivefold cultivation technique. I really didn't expect that there would be such a cultivation technique in the Federal University's Cultivation Technique Pavilion. At that moment, Lu Feng finally understood the background of the Federal University. Even a cultivation technique for assassination was recorded in the Federal University of a Level 3 life planet. Lu Feng could only imagine how much of a cultivation technique existed in the Cultivation Technique Pavilion in the headquarters. Looks like I have to fight for this specially recruited spot. Perhaps I can use this method to condense my Zun below the star level. However, once it reaches the star level, there won't be any essence left. At that time, if I want to condense and evolve again, I will need the support of the terrifying background of the Federal University. Once a cultivation technique reached the star level, the condensation of a cultivation technique would no longer be related to ordinary techniques. At that time, what was needed was the understanding of Qi, force, and even Tao. If he only relied on himself to fumble around, he would waste too much time. For the first time, Lu Feng was filled with interest towards the specially recruited spot. 1 year? There are less than 8 months left. Maybe I won't be able to compare to those real geniuses after 8 months. However, compared to the disciples of the aristocratic families here, I should be able to. Although the disciples of the aristocratic families who entered here were all geniuses, they couldn't be considered as real geniuses at the peak. After all, those real geniuses didn't need any specially recruited spots at all. Their own existence was the proof. After taking a deep breath, Lu Feng stood up, although he wanted to break through here in one spurt of energy. However, considering that it was already 12 o'clock, Lu Feng didn't continue. Although he didn't have much time now, he wasn't nervous to this extent. After putting the cultivation technique back on the table, Lu Feng walked towards the door. However, after taking 2 steps, Lu Feng suddenly stopped. A trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. However, after feeling it for a moment, Lu Feng just shrugged helplessly. In the end, he walked towards the door without looking back. Looking at Lu Feng's back, the middle-aged man slowly walked out. At this moment, he was incomparably strange. This was because only half of his body appeared. The other parts didn't exist at all, and as he continued to move, it finally appeared completely. There was an indescribable smile on his face as he finally opened his mouth slowly. You can actually feel the existence of the boundary. Not bad. Not bad at all. By the time Lu Feng returned to the dormitory, it was already 12:20 p.m. Unlike the previous day, Su Wenchao and Qi Yunqing had already gone to bed. Lu Feng quietly ran to the bathroom and washed up hastily. Then, he immediately laid down on the bed. He wasn't in a hurry to sleep. Instead, he entered the Sky Network. Lu Feng still remembered his performance during the day. At his limit, he had actually been able to divide his mind power into 5 parts. Although he didn't know the results of the others, Lu Feng had some guesses. There should be some problems with his own results. After entering the Sky Network, Lu Feng started to search for information about mind development quotient. After searching for a long time, Lu Feng found that the mind development quotient was all about its effects. This was similar to what Lu Feng had known in the past. The effect of mind development quotient seemed to be that it could increase one's strength during battle. When a telekinesis master became a telekinesis master, they could learn some techniques that only telekinesis masters had. From then on, a telekinesis master would have the ability to contend with a warrior. Mind development quotient was just like a warrior's innate physical strength. It increased the power of one's attacks. However, this was all that Lu Feng could find out. Lu Feng didn't understand the significance of mind development quotient at all. Of course, there might be more introductions below. However, when he saw the time displayed on the Sky Network, Lu Feng didn't continue reading, as he still had things to do the next day. Anyway, this is how it is. I'll look for it carefully in a few days when I have time. As he thought about this, Lu Feng didn't continue reading. He exited the Sky Network, and Lu Feng quickly fell asleep. Chapter 89. Early the next morning, Qi Yunqing woke up on time. After he left, Lu Feng didn't wake up, which was rare. He looked at the time and slept for another 2 hours before getting up. After getting up, Lu Feng didn't wake up Su Wenxiao, who was still sleeping soundly. Instead, he left the dormitory. Today was the weekend, so the school was on holiday. Lu Feng had originally planned to evolve his cultivation technique in one go. However, when he thought about his agreement with Li Yongheng, Lu Feng wasn't in a hurry to do anything. He opened the Sky Network and connected to Li Yongheng's Sky Network ID. Soon, he received a message. Lu Feng, where are you? This kid isn't loyal. You've been here for 3 days, and you're only contacting me now. When he heard Li Yongheng's words, Lu Feng smiled gently and said, Yongheng, it's my fault this time. I'm already 4 months late. I have to put on an act. All right, I'll come over to find you later. After chatting with Li Yongheng for a while, Lu Feng closed the Sky Network. Li Yongheng's dormitory was Dormitory 43. It was quite a distance away from Lu Feng's dormitory in 97. However, Lu Feng didn't plan on running over. His car was still parked at the dormitory's parking lot. Lu Feng got into his sport car again and drove slowly towards Dormitory 43. It had to be said that the Federal University was really big. The distance between Dormitory 97 and Dormitory 43 was an astonishing 20 kilometers. This distance was almost comparable to the entire length of other universities. However, here, it was only 1/3 of the length of the dormitory area. 15 minutes later, Lu Fenglai arrived at Dormitory 43. When he saw a figure chatting with a few people in front of the dormitory building, Lu Feng smiled from the bottom of his heart. He rolled down the window and shouted at the figure, Li Yongheng. Upon hearing this voice, Li Yongheng was slightly taken aback. He looked at the head that popped out of the car window and laughed. With just a few simple steps, he arrived in front of Lu Feng. He wasn't in a hurry to say anything to Lu Feng. Instead, he kept looking at the car. After a few rounds, Li Yongheng's expression became slightly strange. He looked at Lu Feng and clicked his tongue twice. I didn't expect you, Lu Feng. I haven't seen you for half a year, and you've already bought a suspension car. Isn't this a fantasy series hover car? It said that the selling price is 650,000 yuan. Only you would be willing to spend that much. If I were to buy one, I'm afraid my old man would kill me. Hearing this, Lu Feng shrugged. Lu Feng, who had known Li Yongheng's father for more than 10 years, naturally knew what kind of person his father was. Li Yongheng's family had a lot of power. His father was one of the most powerful people in a second-class city. With the Federation's high salary subsidies, plus Li Yongheng's mother's position as a university director, his family could be considered quite wealthy. Not to mention a 650,000 yuan suspension car. Even if they bought a 1,000,000 yuan car, it wouldn't be a big deal. But they had never done so. It had to be said that Li Yongheng's father was very strict. After exchanging a few words with Lu Feng, Li Yongheng opened the car door and shouted at the people who were talking before. My brothers are here to play with me. Goodbye, brothers. After saying this, Li Yongheng asked Lu Feng to start the engine and leave. Yongheng, what are we going to play today? Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng was silent for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he seemed to have finally remembered. After a smirk, he said to Lu Feng, Don't even think about going back today. Just follow my arrangements. Now the goal is the city center. In Hongluan City, there were quite a number of universities, more than 100 of them. However, most of those universities were in the surrounding areas. Among all the universities in the Cymbidium, Only the Federal University was in the city center. After coming out of the university gate, they would be in the center of Honglan City. At this time, Lu Feng also slowed down. Lu Feng, find a place to park the car. Today is the weekend. There are too many people in the city center. It's a bit troublesome for you to drive. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded. In the city they lived in, every weekend or holiday, the population in the city center would be so large that they couldn't walk. This was something that Lu Feng had experienced before. Although the area of Honglan City was dozens of times larger than a second-tier city, at the same time, the population here was also very large. Therefore, even if it wasn't as crowded as the ones they had seen, it wouldn't be too far off. After finding a parking spot, Lu Feng parked the car inside. Lu Feng, I've been here for more than 4 months, and I haven't had a good time in the city center. This time, let's play to our heart's content. Hearing this, Lu Feng's face darkened slightly. When he saw Li Yongheng's confident look, he thought that since he often came out to play, he had already grasped the situation here. But now that he heard it, Li Yongheng didn't seem to have come out much. But since he was already here, Lu Feng couldn't say anything. You only know how to fool me. Let's go. After saying this, Lu Feng took the lead and walked out. Since Li Yongheng didn't know what fun there was no need to follow him blindly. As they walked, Lu Feng didn't find anything to play. He wasn't very good at playing. Finally, Lu Feng stopped in his tracks. He opened the Sky Network and searched casually. Soon, Lu Feng found the place he wanted to go. What's wrong, Lu Feng? Have you thought of where to go? Seeing Lu Feng's expression, Li Yongheng knew that Lu Feng had thought of where to go. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded slightly and asked, Yongheng, do you still remember the place we wanted to go the most when we were young? Li Yongheng was slightly puzzled and pondered for a moment. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Lu Feng with a strange gaze. How rare that you still remember. Lu Feng sighed softly and looked at the tallest building in the distance with an indescribable emotion. In the end, Lu Feng slowly opened his mouth and said, Yes, I still remember the dreams of my childhood. Although we can't achieve all of them, we have the opportunity to achieve one of them now. Let's go. After saying this, he took the lead and walked forward. Seeing Lu Feng's back view, Li Yongheng sighed softly. He also looked at the towering building. In the end, he stopped sighing and a strange light appeared in his eyes. Seeing that Lu Feng had already walked more than half the distance, Li Yongheng hesitated for a moment. However, in the end, he could only smile faintly and mutter to himself, I hope that I won't be so unlucky. After a few steps, Li Yongheng had already caught up with Lu Feng. The building in the distance looked like it was right in front of them, but it was actually very far away. In this crowded crowd, the two of them walked for nearly an hour before they finally arrived in front of the building. Looking at the towering building, which was the tallest building in the entire Cymbidium, both Li Yongheng and Lu Feng were silent. Gradually, Li Yongheng said slowly, I remember when other children were young, the place that they wanted to go the most was the playground. However, we were different. Since we were young, the place that we wanted to go the most was here. It was the tallest building in the entire Cymbidium. Lu Feng, do you still remember why? Hearing Li Yongheng's question, Lu Feng raised his head and looked at the towering building. Finally, a smile appeared on his face as he said slowly, We were willing to come here. Isn't it because of this and him? Yes. Isn't the biggest reason why we wanted to come here? Isn't it because of the one whose name once shook the entire Federation, the one whose name has now disappeared? The two of them walked and arrived in front of a stone tablet in front of the building. They looked at the words written on it and remained silent. This stone tablet wasn't very tall. It was only about 10 meters tall. Its width was only about 5 meters. However, its value was immeasurable, because the stone tablet was made of a kind of stone that was produced in a remote galaxy in the Federation. It didn't have any special uses. Its biggest use was for decoration. However, its value was simply too high. If this stone tablet, which was 10 meters tall, 5 meters wide, and 2 meters thick, was sold as a whole, it definitely wouldn't be less than 500 billion Federation dollars. This was undoubtedly a frightening number. If this stone tablet was placed somewhere else, it would have been stolen by someone long ago. Even if it was placed in the city center, it was enough to attract some desperados. After all, 500 billion was an astronomical number for anyone. Many people would only earn 1 million or so in their lifetime. For 500 billion, there would be many people who would be willing to take the risk. However, the stone tablet in front of them had already been here for more than 500 years. Yet, in these 500 years, no one had ever tried to steal it. No one had even disrespected it. The reason for all this wasn't because of the Federation government's protection, but because of the words recorded on it. What was recorded on it wasn't some profound cultivation technique, nor was it some important ancient book. Instead, it was some very ordinary words. These words were about the deeds of a person, about his life. And this person was the pride of the entire Cymbidium. He was the pride of the entire Cymbidium, the pride of the entire Federation. He was also the current taboo. His name wasn't mentioned on it. Heavenly God Jialon. Heavenly God. What was recorded here was the life experience of a heavenly god. Heavenly deity realm martial artist. What kind of terrifying existence is that? In the entire Federation, and even in the entire boundless galaxy, heavenly gods are already the top overlords. Their strength is unimaginable. They're the symbol of invincibility, second only to the Divine King. With a wave of their hand, they can shatter a part of the starry sky. A heavenly god can completely shatter a first-grade planet with just a wave of their hand. Chapter 90. Even interstellar fortresses can't stand up to him, unless it's Tianhua. This is a celestial god. It is said that even after billions of creatures become gods, they still have to respect him. Li Yongheng felt a little excited as he read the records. Although they had known about celestial god Sapphire since elementary school, Li Yongheng couldn't help but feel excited when he read about him again. After all, the celestial god was a celestial god from the Cymbidium. Lu Feng couldn't help but recall the memories of celestial god Sapphire. Legend had it that celestial god Sapphire was a peerless god who had appeared 800 years ago. At the time, he had been at the end of the Federation, which was the last supreme of the human race, the Divine King of Chaos. Someone had once said that if it hadn't been for his impulsiveness at the last moment, celestial god Sapphire would have been the most dazzling existence of that era. He would have been able to replace the Divine King of Chaos and become the new supreme protector of the human race. Celestial god Sapphire had been born in the Cymbidium. When he had been young, he had displayed absolute talent. Later on, his performance had been even more amazing. He had progressed step by step and had even entered the Federal University. During that time, his name had even shaken the entire Federation. His talent had surpassed anything else, so he had been called a demon-level existence. During his studies, he had been valued by the Divine King of Chaos and had been taken in as his only disciple. In the following years, celestial god Sapphire, who had been personally taught by the Divine King of Chaos, had shocked the entire galaxy. He had broken through countless shackles and broken through them. At the age of 31, he had broken through these shackles and entered the realm of a god. After becoming a god, he had achieved results that made all the races in the universe tremble. At the top of the universe, where billions of races had gathered, he had no taboos. He had defeated the disciples of the supreme great beings of the other supreme races. He had created many myths and legends of the human race. According to his development, celestial god Sapphire could have become a new faith of the human race. He would have been able to replace the Divine King of Chaos and become the Divine King of Chaos. However, something that had happened afterward had made celestial god Sapphire a thing of the past. It had even become a taboo for the human race. Humans were one of the 3 supreme races of the Milky Way, the central galaxy of the universe. They were also one of the supreme races of the universe. However, this was only one of them was not the strongest. Apart from humans, there were a few other supreme great beings of the universe. Among them, great beings at the level of Universe Supreme were constantly emerging. Even now, they still had godly kings keeping watch. The Netherworld race was one of them. More than 600 years ago, one of the two disciples of the Netherworld race's ancestor, the Netherworld King, was a peerless genius who was known as the young Netherworld King. Because he had attempted to refine the space law, he had accidentally encountered spatial turbulence and was forced to be exiled to the Human Federation. The place where he had appeared was the galaxy where the Cymbidium was located. The young Netherworld King, who had rushed out of the wormhole, had suffered an indescribable injury. In order to quickly recover from his injury and return to the Netherworld race's homeland, he had used the Netherworld race's secret technique, Great Devouring. At that moment, the galaxy where the Cymbidium was located had suffered an indescribable turmoil and heavy damage. Countless creatures and planets had been devoured, becoming the driving force for the young Netherworld King to recover. Originally, this was not a big deal. After all, even if they had lost tens of billions of humans, it was not a big deal to the Federation. However, coincidentally, Celestial God Sapphire had returned to the place where he had been born in order to break through the final realm. At that time, he had been in a state of seclusion. Due to the influence of the young Netherworld King's secret technique, he had been awakened from his seclusion. To Celestial God Sapphire, the Cymbidium was his homeland. As for this galaxy, it was his home. Seeing his homeland suffering such crazy destruction, seeing his clansmen dying one after another, Celestial God Sapphire was finally enraged. Although he had not broken through and shattered the final shackles to become an existence like the Divine King, he had still not broken through. However, Celestial God Sapphire had still surpassed the limits of any celestial god. His strength was comparable to that of the Divine King. The young Netherworld King, who had used a supreme technique to recover to his peak state, had his supreme divine body shattered by Celestial God Sapphire the moment they met. If he hadn't used a supreme technique, he would have been instantly killed by Celestial God Sapphire. However, even though he had used a supreme technique, he was still crazily pursued by Celestial God Sapphire. When he thought of the destruction of his clansmen, when he thought of the death of the people he had been protecting, Celestial God Sapphire forgot everything. He had even forgotten the identity of the young Netherworld King. He had gone crazy and chased after the young Netherworld King. He had traversed more than half of the Federation and directly killed his way out of the Milky Way. Finally, in the boundless Milky Way, Celestial God Sapphire caught up to the young Netherworld King, who had exhausted all of his secret technique. He didn't hold back at all. He used his most powerful killing move. In just a blink of an eye, the peerless monster of the Dark Clan, who was known as the next great king of the Dark Clan, young king of the Dark Clan, who had refined the supreme god body, was completely obliterated. If he was just an ordinary genius, then he would have died. After all, the relationship between the Netherworld race and the human race wasn't that harmonious. However, the one who had died was a genius with the potential to become the Divine King. This was the same as severing the hope of an entire race. For any race, a monstrous genius with the potential to become the Divine King was an absolute treasure. His status in a race was the highest apart from the primogeniture. As for the young Netherworld King, he was the most promising existence in the entire Netherworld race. He was also the only one who had the potential to enter the Supremacy Realm and help the Netherworld race reach its peak. His death was absolutely unbearable for the entire Netherworld race. Therefore, after sensing the death of the young Netherworld King, the primogeniture of the Netherworld race, the Netherworld King, descended. Although Heavenly God Jalon was only one step away from becoming a Divine King, this one step was like the difference between heaven and earth. According to legends, Heavenly God Jalon had once used his supreme technique to temporarily shatter the Divine King's forbidden domain. The limit of his physical body had reached a mythical domain that could amplify his strength by 11 times. An 11-fold mythical domain was a temporary invincibility. It was a domain power that could contend against the Divine King. However, Heavenly God Jalon had always relied on the amplification of his supreme technique to enter this domain. Very quickly, the effects of the supreme technique disappeared, and Heavenly God Jalon was in imminent danger. Finally, at the moment when the origin of heavenly God, Jialan's godly body, was shattered, the supremacy of the human race, the divine king, arrived. Both sides had nothing to discuss. After all, heavenly God Jialan had already touched the bottom line of the netherworld race, and the netherworld king had shattered the origin of heavenly God Jialan's godly body, severing his hopes of becoming the divine king in the future. This was why the two great divine king did not say anything when they met. They immediately engaged in an earth-shattering battle. The battle between the divine king could be said to have shaken the entire universe. Their collision shattered the barren, boundless galaxy and made it a thing of the past. Afterward, the battle continued, alarming the last few ancient beings in the entire universe. This was an extreme battle that shook the entire universe. Unfortunately, the final result was that neither side could do anything to the other. Netherworld King's physical body was incomparably powerful. He had the supreme, godly body, Netherworld body. Like heavenly God Jialan, he was an existence whose physical body had reached the mythical domain. As for the Divine King, he relied on his martial path avatar to shatter the Divine King's forbidden domain and step into the mythical domain that could amplify his strength by 11 times. It was hard to say which of the two mythical domains was stronger or weaker, and the danger of their battle was too great. In the end, it attracted the intervention of the supremes of the other races, who completely stopped the war in the Divine Flower Galaxy. After the Divine King's conquest of the Divine Flower Galaxy, the two great races did not reconcile because of the collision between the Divine Kings. In the end, the two great races broke off completely, and a war between the races that had yet to come to a conclusion even now began. The two Divine Kings were both extreme existences. The Divine King, Chaos Calmer, was brimming with talent. He was almost one step away from shattering the second stage of the Divine King's forbidden domain and stepping into the mythical domain of the physical body. As for Netherworld King, he was an ancient divine king of the Netherworld race, and he was also almost one step away from stepping into the second stage of the Divine King's mythical domain. Among all the Divine Kings of that era in the universe, and even among all the Divine Kings in history, the two of them belonged to the pinnacle existences. When they collided, the two Supremes did not hold back at all. Other than the Divine King's supreme techniques, they used all the killing techniques that they could use. After returning, the two Divine Kings suffered grievous injuries that were difficult to heal. Netherworld King relied on the accumulation of countless years to fall into a deep sleep. However, the Divine King, Chaos Calmer, did not have such good luck. His cultivation time was far shorter than Netherworld King's. Although he was exceptionally talented, he suffered more injuries than Netherworld King. Finally, 500 years ago, the human race clashed with another pinnacle race. The Divine King, Chaos Calmer, fought against the Divine King of the Origin race, Origin King. In the end, because of his grievous injuries, he was no match for Origin King, who was at the first stage of the mythical domain. At the last moment, the Divine King, Chaos Calmer, for the stability of the human race, disintegrated his divine body in martial path techniques. He used supreme techniques at the Divine King's level and completely obliterated Origin King in a moment of extreme condition. At the same time, the last supreme of the human race fell. The entire universe had a common understanding of the fall of the Divine King, which was that if he had not clashed with Netherworld King, the most powerful Divine King in the universe, then Origin King alone would not have been able to make him pay the price of annihilation in order to win. To be precise, it was precisely because of that battle with Netherworld King that the Divine King, Chaos Calmer, had reached his end. And the cause of that battle was heavenly God Jialan. It could be said that if it were not for heavenly God Jialan's impulsiveness, the human race would not be in this awkward era without the Divine King. No one cared about the reason for heavenly God Jialan's madness. They only saw that because of heavenly God Jialan, the last Divine King of the human race, heavenly God Jialan, had fallen. Therefore, in the Federation, heavenly god Jialan's name had become a taboo. It was also because of this that almost no one in the Federation knew heavenly god Jialan's name. Of course, this Federation was a federation outside of the galaxy where the Cymbidium was located. Chapter 91. In this galaxy, especially on the Cymbidium, although the Federation had tried its best to downplay the existence of heavenly god Jialan as a hero of the Cymbidium, how could he be forgotten? Even after more than 600 years, the humans of the Cymbidium still hadn't forgotten his existence. The stone tablet in front of him was a monument of ultimate glory that had been set up for his existence. This is a kind of tragedy. The Federation only saw the endless disasters brought about by heavenly god Jialan, but they never asked the reason for all this. If we humans were bullied to this extent and didn't fight back, then what use would the Divine King have? It's a pity that the talented virtual king of a generation, the future Divine King, has come to an end just like that. Looking at the introduction on the stone tablet, Lu Feng sighed softly. It had to be said that this was the tragedy of an era. Perhaps in the eyes of these people, they only saw the disaster that heavenly god Jialan had brought to the Federation. They didn't understand. If heavenly god Jialan hadn't fought back at that time, then the human race would still be human. I don't know if heavenly god Jialan had fallen in the end. In the records they knew, heavenly god Jialan hadn't been mentioned at all. Many people believed that he had already fallen. After all, the origin of his divine body had been completely shattered. One had to know that heavenly god Jialan had walked the path of the physical body. His cultivation technique and martial path incarnation weren't very powerful. They could only be considered average. It was almost impossible for him to reach the Divine King realm by relying on these two aspects. The only person who had once broken the 11th Divine King's forbidden domain and set foot in the mythical realm had been completely shattered. There was no longer any hope of recovery. It could be said that even if he hadn't died in that great battle, heavenly god Jialan had come to an end. He had already lost the ability to be powerful. After his divine body's origin had been shattered, he could no longer reform his divine body. This was something that heavenly god Jialan couldn't bear. The shattering of his divine body's origin meant that he had no hope of becoming a divine king. In fact, he couldn't even maintain the strength of a heavenly god. Even if he survived, his strength would only be that of an ordinary god. He would lose all ability to resist, even if he faced a powerhouse with a true body. No matter what, heavenly god Jialan was a hero to the Cymbidium. The people of the Federation can forget him and pile all of their resentment on him, but we can't. In the eyes of us, Cymbidium, heavenly god, he is a true god that belongs to us. Looking at the end of the stone tablet, Li Yongheng also lamented. Heavenly god Jialan had god, Jiao had his own thoughts. Come, all right, Lu Feng, we've seen enough. Let's not hang around here anymore. Let's find a fun place to spend the weekend. Lu Feng glanced at Li Yongheng with a puzzled expression. To be honest, there weren't many sights to see in Honglan City. The most famous sights were the four major buildings. The four major buildings were the main Cymbidium Psychic Hall, the main Warrior Hall, the main teaching building of the Federal University, and the Federation government building in front of them. Among the four major buildings, the tallest one was the Federation government building in front of them. Although the Psychic Hall and the Warrior Hall surpassed the government building in terms of status, due to heavenly god Jialan, the two halls had never built their own buildings to surpass the government building. Therefore, the Federation government building could be said to be the tallest building in the entire Cymbidium. For Honglan City, this could be considered as a scenic spot. However, looking at Li Yongheng's expression, he didn't seem to be interested at all. This made Lu Feng a little puzzled. He looked at Li Yongheng until he was slightly scared. Lu Feng then said, Yongheng, I remember that you liked to stand on high places the most when you were young. At that time, you said that only by standing on high places could you control the overall situation. Now that you're here, why do you want to leave? Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng smiled awkwardly. He replied, You remember that when I was young. Now that I've grown up, I naturally don't like it. All right, let's leave quickly. There's so many government officials coming in and out of here. Don't you hate dealing with these government officials the most? Lu Feng didn't answer. He just continued to look at Li Yongheng with a strange expression. Finally, an inexplicable smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Li Yongheng took a step back when he saw this smile. He actually felt a chill run down his spine. Lu Feng, what's with that look in your eyes? What do you want to do? With a sinister smile, Lu Feng suddenly pulled Li Yongheng and said, Yongheng, are you hiding something from me? You have to know that we grew up together. You can't hide your thoughts from me, kid. Looking at you, there must be something you haven't told me. If you don't tell me clearly, I'll have to go up today. Seeing Lu Feng's expression, Li Yongheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lu Feng was right. He did hide something from Lu Feng. However, he hadn't thought about it yet. Naturally, he wouldn't tell Lu Feng. Li Yongheng raised his head and looked at the government building that he couldn't see the top of. After a little calculation, Li Yongheng finally gritted his teeth and said, I'm not hiding anything from you. Since you want to go up, then go up. After saying this, he actually swung his arm and walked up first. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng was slightly taken aback, but after shrugging his shoulders, he followed closely behind Li Yongheng and walked up. In the beginning, Li Yongheng still had a generous look on his face. However, when they walked into the government building, Li Yongheng suddenly became timid. Originally, because he was a warrior, Li Yongheng's body was slightly taller than Lu Feng's. However, at this moment, looking at his restrained appearance, Lu Feng was really amused. Li Yongheng kept turning his head as if he was looking at something. At this time, Lu Feng finally understood. He walked up from behind and suddenly patted Li Yongheng's shoulder. It was this that scared Li Yongheng so much that he almost jumped up. He looked at Lu Feng, who was laughing strangely behind him, and his face was slightly red. He said with some annoyance, Lu Feng, what are you doing? Are you trying to scare me to death? Looking at Li Yongheng's appearance, Lu Feng just laughed and said, Yongheng, are you afraid of meeting someone? Why are you like this? Hearing this, Li Yongheng's expression changed slightly. Seeing him like this, Lu Feng knew that his guess was right. Without waiting for Li Yongheng to explain anything, Lu Feng waved his hand and directly walked up the stairway without letting him say a word. Seeing Lu Feng's appearance, Li Yongheng's face was slightly flushed, as if he was embarrassed. Then, he looked around again. After making sure that there was no one else, he finally followed Lu Feng's footsteps and walked up the stairway. It had to be said that the government office building was really too tall. Even if they took the stairway, it took nearly 10 minutes to finally reach the top. After walking down the stairway, Lu Fenglai went to the side of the windowsill and began to look down at everything below from a high altitude. Beside him, Li Yongheng also walked over. It seemed that he felt that he would not meet anyone at the top. Li Yongheng gradually let go of his courage. He stood next to Lu Feng and also looked down at everything below. Yongheng, looking down from here, it really feels different. In Lu Feng's eyes, there were only the vast clouds and hundreds of rooftops that slightly broke through the clouds. The only buildings that could be seen clearly were the other three main high-rise buildings. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng nodded gently. Lu Feng was right. He had liked the feeling of looking down from a high place since he was a child. If it weren't for the fear of bumping into someone, he would have come up long ago. This time, he naturally had to take a good look at this place. Lu Feng did not speak, nor did he leave. He also looked down at everything below. Gradually, his expression became a little absent-minded. At this moment, Lu Feng thought of many things. He thought of the humiliation he had suffered in the past. He thought of the hard work he had put in the past 7 years, but he had never received any rewards. He thought of the appearance of the Tongtian Futu. He thought of the process of his transformation. He also thought of the 9 illusions he had experienced when he ascended the altar of the Gufang clan. Everything seemed to have happened yesterday, causing his mind to flutter continuously. When Lu Feng woke up, it was already half an hour later. What woke Lu Feng up wasn't him, but a clear voice. Yongheng, what are you doing here? Did you come to see me? When he heard this voice, Lu Feng turned around. He finally understood why Li Yongheng had been unwilling to come here. At the moment, a beautiful and lively figure was standing beside Li Yongheng. Her face was full of smiles, and she looked delighted. The moment he saw this girl, Lu Feng seemed to understand something. That was because at that moment, Li Yongheng, who was facing this girl, was standing there with an uneasy expression. When he saw Lu Feng looking over, his face turned even redder. Lu Feng smiled at Li Yongheng and asked, "Yongheng, who is this?" When he heard Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng stammered and didn't say anything. On the other hand, the beautiful girl looked at Lu Feng generously. After scrutinizing him, she smiled gently and replied, "You must be Lu Feng. I've heard Yongheng mention you before. I'm very happy to meet you." After saying this, she actually extended her hand first. When Lu Feng saw this, he naturally wouldn't be rude. He also stretched out his arm and held that slender little hand. After shaking it a few times politely, Lu Feng put it down. This was because he could already tell that there was something unusual between this girl and Li Yongheng. "I'm Lu Feng, Yongheng's best friend since young. May I know who you are?" Chapter 92. Lu Feng and Li Yongheng had been good brothers since 10 years ago. Lu Feng naturally knew what kind of friends Li Yongheng had. Lu Feng was sure that he had never seen the girl in front of him before. Just looking at her appearance, it seemed that she had a close relationship with Li Yongheng. Hearing Lu Feng's question, the girl's smile became brighter. She replied, "You definitely don't know me. My name is Wang Xiaoran, and I am eternal." As she said this, the girl turned her head and glanced at Li Yongheng. She found that he actually had an anxious look at the moment. Then she smiled mischievously and continued, "I am Eternal's friend. I have known each other since childhood. It's just that we stopped contacting each other when we grew up. So it's reasonable that you don't know me." Lu Feng nodded gently, but didn't say anything. He just looked at Li Yongheng strangely. Being looked at by Lu Feng, Li Yongheng could only stand there helplessly and awkwardly. His face was extremely flushed. It was also the first time that Lu Feng saw Li Yongheng like this. He knew that things were not so simple. Otherwise, Li Yongheng would not have such an expression. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. At this time, Wang Xiaoran spoke again. "Eternal, since you came with Lu Feng, then have fun. I am still working. Wait for me to go down and hand over my work. I will come to you. Remember, don't think about running away this time. Wait for me." After saying this, Wang Xiaoran smiled politely at Lu Feng and quickly ran down. Seeing Wang Xiaoran disappear from sight, Li Yongheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. After confirming that Wang Xiaoran had really left, Li Yongheng suddenly pulled Lu Feng and ran toward the stairway. Lu Feng naturally couldn't leave like this. With Lu Feng's current strength, as long as he didn't want to, Li Yongheng naturally couldn't pull Lu Feng away. After all, even after a holiday, Li Yongheng had only broken through to the intermediate warrior. But Lu Feng had become an intermediate warrior, which was a small level higher than Li Yongheng. He didn't want to, so naturally, Li Yongheng couldn't pull him away. Looking at Lu Feng, who didn't want to move, Li Yongheng showed a look of gritted teeth. He said, "My good brother, let's leave here first. After we leave here, I will tell you." After saying this, he pulled Lu Feng again. Seeing Li Yongheng's anxious look, Lu Feng smiled naughtily. "Then you must tell me everything without reservation. Otherwise, I will come back later to find your childhood sweetheart to understand it." Looking at Lu Feng's appearance, Li Yongheng knew that Lu Feng had already guessed some of it. After he smiled helplessly, he nodded fiercely. This time, Lu Feng didn't embarrass Li Yongheng. He followed Li Yongheng to the stairway. After more than 10 minutes, the two finally returned to the bottom. After walking down the stairway, Li Yongheng didn't hesitate and walked directly outside. Lu Feng followed closely behind Li Yongheng. After leaving the Federation building for a long time, the two stopped. At this time, Li Yongheng suddenly took a few deep breaths. It seemed that he had consumed a lot of energy just now. Lu Feng naturally knew that this was not because Li Yongheng's physique was not good, but because he was too nervous just now. Otherwise, how could an intermediate warrior be so tired just by walking a few steps? Looking at Li Yongheng, who stood up again, Lu Feng coughed softly and asked, "Yongheng, can you tell me now? Seeing Lu Feng's appearance, Li Yongheng was helpless. However, he had already promised, so he naturally wouldn't go back on his words. After organizing a little, Li Yongheng finally told Lu Feng everything. The girl's name was Wang Xiaoran. This was indeed true, and she was really Li Yongheng's good friend since childhood. It was just that this was too good, because she was now Li Yongheng's girlfriend. Not a female friend, but a real girlfriend. For this girlfriend of his, Li Yongheng was also very helpless. Now that he had just embarked on the road to university, he didn't think about looking for a girlfriend at all. But who knew that such a person would pop out? If it was just a girlfriend, then it would be like this. But the problem was that this girlfriend was basically his future wife. To think that there was already an engagement between the two of them. Hearing this, Lu Feng was a little stunned. He never knew that his good brother was someone who already had a wife. I thought that this summer vacation was really sent by my dad to the army for training, but who knew that he actually tricked me back to the family? And the reason was to let me meet Wang Xiaoran. Since he had already said the most critical thing, Li Yongheng naturally did not hide anything and began to pour out his grievances. Lu Feng finally knew about Li Yongheng's movements during the summer vacation. After the vacation, Li Yongheng's father directly stuffed Li Yongheng onto the Federation's battleship. Li Yongheng originally thought that he was going to the army for training, but who knew that when he got off the spaceship, he actually saw the place where his family was. Once he got off the spaceship, it seemed that the family was afraid that Li Yongheng would escape. The family directly tied Li Yongheng up and brought him to the family. Then, it was a very melodramatic plot. The parents of the two sides met, and then the marriage between Li Yongheng and Wang Xiaoran was settled without Li Yongheng's knowledge. In 2 months, Li Yongheng and Wang Xiaoran were together almost every day. Originally, Li Yongheng didn't feel anything. He just thought that he saw his childhood friend. So, they quickly became familiar with each other. When they left, Li Yongheng's parents suddenly told Li Yongheng about the engagement between them, and he naturally couldn't accept it. So far, Li Yongheng was only 17 years old, and he had never considered these things. However, Li Yongheng's father was very strong. Since it had been settled, he naturally wouldn't allow Li Yongheng to resist. He told Li Yongheng that when Li Yongheng graduated, he wanted him to marry Wang Xiaoran, and Li Yongheng could only accept it helplessly. When he saw Wang Xiaoran, his mood was completely different. At this time, school finally started. Li Yongheng naturally left his family and came to school. But who knew that Wang Xiaoran was also sent here by her family? Moreover, in the Federal University, she was even arranged to be in the same class as Li Yongheng. Wang Xiaoran's personality was relatively independent. She would choose to work during the holidays, and today was naturally the same. Originally, when he came out with Lu Feng, Li Yongheng temporarily forgot everything. But when they came to the Federation building, Li Yongheng suddenly remembered that Wang Xiaoran was working in the government. Therefore, when Li Yongheng entered here, he hesitated. He told Lu Feng the whole story. Lu Feng was naturally a little stunned. He didn't expect that his brother already had a fiancée. This was truly inconceivable. However, Lu Feng's first reaction when he recovered was not that Li Yongheng had a fiancée, but he was surprised by Wang Xiaoran's identity. You said that this lovely girl is actually a warrior. She is even a senior warrior. How is this possible? Shrugging helplessly, Li Yongheng also sighed. One of the biggest reasons why he couldn't accept Wang Xiaoran was also because of her warrior identity. Which man could tolerate his wife being stronger than him? It seemed that he thought of Li Yongheng's life after marriage. Lu Feng suddenly showed a strange face. Seeing Lu Feng's appearance, Li Yongheng naturally knew what Lu Feng was thinking. After punching Lu Feng angrily, Li Yongheng could only sigh helplessly. I say, Yongheng, Wang Xiaoran is really good. Although she is stronger than you now, the future is uncertain. Don't be too depressed. Let's talk about the future later. Lu Feng looked at Li Yongheng's depressed appearance, and naturally, he would not laugh at him. He gently patted Li Yongheng's shoulders and comforted him. Well, since things have already happened, don't think about it anymore. What we have to do now is to relax. As for the rest, Let's talk about it later. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng had nothing to say. He could only smile helplessly and recover. Looking at the time, Lu Feng calculated and said, "It's almost noon now. Let's go eat first. We have been here for so long, but we haven't had a good meal outside. This time it's my treat." Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng, who recovered, smiled and said, "Since it's you, kid, who is bleeding, then I naturally can't be polite. Let's go to the flower garden in Honglan City. I haven't wanted to go there for a long time. Since you are treating today, I won't be polite." After saying this, Li Yongheng walked directly in front. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng could only smile and chase after him. The flower garden was the name of a hotel. In the entire Cymbidium, or even the entire Federation, the flower garden was one of the most famous hotels. Naturally, with a great reputation came high expenses. Lu Feng also knew that with Li Yongheng's family conditions, if it was just the flower garden, it was nothing at all. However, his family education was too strict. Since young, Li Yongheng rarely revealed his family background. Even his standard of living was no different from ordinary people. At least, Lu Feng knew that Li Yongheng's college living expenses were only 2,000 Federation coins per month. Perhaps in the eyes of many people, this was not a small number. However, this kind of living expenses was really very little for a warrior. With Li Yongheng's standard of living, not to mention going out to eat, he couldn't even eat a big meal in school. If he ate a big meal today, then he would probably starve for the next few days. It was also because of this reason that Li Yongheng showed unusual enthusiasm after hearing that Lu Feng was treating. Chapter 93. Li Yongheng didn't even need a map to guide him to the garden. Li Yongheng quickly brought Lu Feng there. Lu Feng knew that Li Yongheng must have been drooling over the garden for a long time. Lu Feng also knew that Li Yongheng's family background was definitely not simple. Although they had been together for 10 years, Lu Feng felt a lot of differences. He knew that Li Yongheng's family was definitely not as simple as a military officer in a second-class city in the Cymbidium. When he heard Li Yongheng's words, Lu Feng keenly sensed something. After all, a force that could be called a family was definitely not a small force. Seeing Li Yongheng walking quickly in front of him, Lu Feng smiled helplessly and followed Li Yongheng. The two of them walked through the magnificent entrance of the garden. "Welcome." As soon as they walked through the entrance, they saw 2 rows of beautiful waitresses standing at the entrance. Undoubtedly, the waitresses' attitude and standards were very suitable for the Federation's top hotel chain. They didn't slack off just because Lu Feng and Li Yongheng were students. Instead, they greeted them with the same service attitude. Lu Feng smiled in response. At this time, Li Yongheng had already walked into the hall. Soon, a waitress in the lobby walked over and stood in front of Li Yongheng. She said, "Sir, is there anything we can help you with?" Li Yongheng didn't say anything. Instead, he waited for Lu Feng to come over and glanced at Lu Feng. Seeing this, the waitress immediately understood. She looked at Lu Feng and asked again, "Sir, do you need any service?" Lu Feng had seen this kind of situation many times. He replied, "Arrange a room." Hearing this, the waiter nodded with a smile and turned to walk inside. Li Yongheng and Lu Feng followed closely behind and followed the waiter to the private room area. Soon, the waiter brought the two of them to a private room called Qingyi Residence. The waiter opened the door and bowed slightly to the two of them before turning around and leaving. A few minutes after they entered the Qingyi residence and sat down, another waiter walked in. Seeing the item in his hand, Lu Feng knew that he was in charge of ordering. Sure enough, the waiter turned on the heavenly network in his hand and pulled out a 3D virtual menu. There were various types of cuisines on it, as well as specific introductions and pictures of various dishes. "Sir, please order," the waiter said. Upon hearing this, Lu Feng did not answer directly. Instead, he glanced at Li Yongheng and said, "Yongheng, since it's my treat, you can order whatever you like." Li Yongheng didn't stand on ceremony with Lu Feng and started looking through the dishes. Soon, he finally chose more than 10 dishes. Li Yongheng closed the 3D menu and said, "Okay, That's enough. Hurry up and order. The waiter nodded gently. Just like the previous waitress, he bowed and left the room. Sitting in the private room and looking at the constantly changing three-dimensional space, Li Yongheng leaned back comfortably on the chair. He looked at Lu Feng, who was sitting peacefully by the side, and said, Lu Feng, it's good to be rich. Look at the environment here. It's comparable to being in the virtual space. Lu Feng looked around again and nodded gently. This wasn't comparable to the virtual space. It was the real virtual space. Sitting in the room was like being in the middle of infinite stars and being surrounded by the constantly changing universe. This kind of enjoyment was indeed top-notch. Soon, all the dishes Li Yongheng ordered were served. From the beginning of their order to the dishes being served, the whole process took less than 20 minutes. Such speed was undoubtedly very fast. The two of them were naturally very satisfied with this. After seeing the waiter leave, the two of them looked at each other and then began to crazily snatch the food. This was a habit. Since young, the two of them had been like this. Although Lu Feng's talent was not good and could not become a warrior, he always worked hard and constantly trained his body, so his need for food was also very high. Li Yongheng was even more so. Generally, as long as there was a slight hesitation, the food that was served would disappear in an instant. Naturally, this made the two of them develop this bad habit. The food in front of them quickly decreased, and soon there was only one plate left. The two of them looked at each other and then crazily rushed to the last plate of food. It had to be said that after becoming an intermediate warrior, Lu Feng was obviously much stronger after awakening his bloodline. In terms of the degree of perfection of his body, Li Yongheng was far inferior to Lu Feng. In addition, in terms of warrior level, he was obviously behind by a lot. Therefore, without a doubt, the last plate of food was snatched by Lu Feng. Looking at Li Yongheng proudly, Lu Feng was not in a hurry to eat at this time. Looking at Lu Feng eating spoonful after spoonful, Li Yongheng was so angry that his teeth itched. But in the face of Li Yongheng's attitude, Lu Feng just laughed presumptuously. After slowly eating, Lu Feng opened his mouth and said to Li Yongheng, Yongheng, how many years has it been? Since young, I have never snatched from you. Today, I can finally vent my anger a little. Hearing this, Li Yongheng was slightly surprised, but did not show any other expression. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a moment, he looked at Lu Feng again with a strange look. Li Yongheng opened his mouth and asked, Lu Feng, to tell you the truth, what level are you now? I'm asking about the warrior level. Lu Feng was slightly silent. In fact, he did not intend to hide it from Li Yongheng. For others, he might need to keep a trump card, but for his own brother, Lu Feng did not want to hold back too much. After organizing a little, Lu Feng opened his mouth and replied, During the time I was away, I had some fortuitous encounters. Now my warrior level has broken through. Now, I'm an intermediate warrior. For a moment, Li Yongheng showed a strange look. In this, Lu Feng could naturally see a lot. There was relief, joy, shock, and a trace of disappointment. Soon, Li Yongheng adjusted his state of mind. He looked at Lu Feng and said, To be honest, compared to your talent as a psychic, Lu Feng, you really should have chosen the warrior system. Looking at the whole galaxy where the Cymbidium is located, there are not many who can compare with this kind of aptitude. I really don't know. With such talent, why did you spend 7 years and still not break through to become a beginner warrior? He spent a whole 7 years, but the strength in his body did not even reach half a star. Now, in just half a year, he suddenly rose from a beginner warrior to an intermediate warrior. This kind of speed was really frightening. Lu Feng was silent again. For him to be able to rise so quickly, it could be said that he had narrowly escaped death. In the face of the seal of the divine king of the netherworld, if he had not stimulated his bloodline at the last moment and shattered the shackles, then the end waiting for him would have been to be suppressed and never be able to rise again. But he could not say these words to Li Yongheng, because the beginning of his metamorphosis had been completed by relying on the existence of the heavenly Futu in his space of consciousness. These were Lu Feng's deepest secrets. They were things that even his parents couldn't tell them. So at this moment, Lu Feng hesitated. Seeing Lu Feng like this, Li Yongheng knew that Lu Feng had some difficulties. Although he wanted to know, he would not force his brother too much. He smiled slightly and said to Lu Feng, "It's okay, I just asked casually. I don't want to know too much." Li Yongheng's words made Lu Feng's heart tremble deeply. At this moment, he thought of the more than 10 years of interaction with Li Yongheng. An emotion called guilt flowed in his heart. After thinking for a while, Lu Feng decided. Although the secret of the heavenly Futu could not be said, there was no need to hide the matter of his bloodline, because one day it would not be a secret. After a moment of silence, just as Li Yongheng was about to find another topic to talk about, Lu Feng opened his mouth and said, "Actually, Yongheng, it's not that you can't say this, but I hope you can help me keep it a secret." Upon seeing Lu Feng's solemn expression, Li Yongheng was slightly taken aback. However, after a moment, he nodded his head and said, "Lu Feng, if it's really inconvenient, then you don't have to say it. Everything that has happened since we were young is understandable." These words made Lu Feng finally firm on his decision. He looked at Li Yongheng and said slowly, "Yongheng, the reason for this metamorphosis is actually my body." "Your body?" Li Yongheng was slightly taken aback. He did not understand what Lu Feng meant. As for Lu Feng, he only nodded his head firmly. "That's right, it's my body. Of course, to be exact, it's the inheritance that my body belongs to. In other words, it's my bloodline." Upon hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng stood up abruptly from his seat. His face was filled with shock. However, Lu Feng actually saw a hint of delight amidst this shock. Li Yongheng stared at Lu Feng with a burning gaze, as if he wanted to see through Lu Feng. He asked in a trembling voice, "Lu Feng, do you mean that you are also a god's descendant? A god's descendant had become a god-level entity. The power that existed within their body was divine power, and their body had undergone a complete transformation. It had become a divine body. The appearance of a divine body had already transcended the boundaries of mortals. Their bloodline had been innately imprinted with the mark of a god. Regardless of whether it was cultivation or other aspects, they would far surpass ordinary people. The higher the rank of the descendant, the denser the bloodline, and the more terrifying the aptitude of the descendant would be. Such an entity was a god's descendant." As he looked at Lu Feng, Li Yongheng had never imagined that Lu Feng would actually be a god's descendant. However, he quickly put on a puzzled expression and sized up Lu Feng before mumbling to himself, "That's not right. A god's descendant would normally awaken at birth. However, you only awaken later. This shouldn't be." Chapter 94. A strange glint appeared in Lu Feng's eyes as he listened to Li Yongheng mumbling to himself. He had only found out about the awakening of the divine descendant's bloodline later on. Lu Feng understood that most people wouldn't pay attention to the divine descendant. Li Yongheng naturally wouldn't look into this for no reason. Furthermore, if he didn't have a certain status, he wouldn't have been able to find out even if he wanted to. However, he knew so much about it. This was interesting. "All right, I remember now." In an instant, Li Yongheng's exclamation shocked Lu Feng. He looked at Li Yongheng, not understanding why his brother was so shocked. However, before Lu Feng could say anything, Li Yongheng spoke first. His voice trembled slightly, as if he had thought of something that made him unusually excited. "The bloodline seal. Your bloodline has been sealed by someone. It was only released automatically after your body met the requirements." The bloodline seal. Lu Feng looked at Li Yongheng with a strange expression. If the divine descendant was something that could be found through hard work, then the bloodline seal wasn't something that could be found through the heavenly network or any other means. Even Lu Feng had only found out about the bloodline seal that Luo Gongzi had given him when he had worked together with Luo Gongzi to break the seal of the divine king of the netherworld. Although the bloodline seal wasn't much, it was definitely a secret to anyone who wasn't a divine descendant. However, Lu Feng hadn't expected that Li Yongheng would actually know about it. Furthermore, judging from his expression, he definitely hadn't just heard of it. He should have truly understood and known about the existence of the bloodline seal. Lu Feng didn't nod or shake his head, because Li Yongheng's guess was wrong. In his body, it wasn't the bloodline seal that was sealed by someone, but something even more terrifying, the bloodline shackles. Among the descendants of the divine descendant, there were some whose bloodline was much denser than the current generation, almost reaching the denser bloodline of the previous generations. However, their physical bodies couldn't be compared to the previous generations of the divine descendant. Therefore, in order to grow enough to adapt to the power brought about by the bloodline seal, these bloodlines had to be sealed so that their bodies wouldn't disintegrate due to the release of the bloodline. This was the existence of the bloodline seal. However, there was an even more terrifying existence above the bloodline seal, and that was the bloodline shackle. The bloodline shackles weren't man-made. They were all born with the density of their bloodlines, even surpassing the densest bloodline of a generation of God descendants. When such an existence was born, even the first generation of the divine descendant wouldn't be able to withstand it. Therefore, in order to protect their existence, their bloodline would set up boundless restrictions to seal themselves. Only when the divine descendant's body grew enough to withstand it would they shatter the bloodline shackles and completely awaken under the influence of an extremely powerful external force. It could be said that there were many bloodline seals in a single generation of a family, but the bloodline shackles would almost never appear. A family could continue for thousands of generations, tens of thousands of generations, and have millions of bloodline disciples, but the bloodline shackles might not appear among these millions of disciples. This was because the bloodline shackles represented the most terrifying bloodline of a generation of the divine descendant. Moreover, the bloodline shackles weren't that easy to shatter. Those who could shatter the bloodline shackles and successfully release the power of the bloodline might not even be 1 in 3 people. And the more powerful the bloodline, the more difficult it was to release it. If it was the Divine King's bloodline shackles, it would be even more unbreakable. For existences with the Divine King's bloodline shackles, even if they used the power of those super families, it would still be extremely difficult to succeed. Not even 1 in 10 people could succeed. No matter how Li Yongheng thought about it, he probably wouldn't have thought of the bloodline shackles. After all, such things were almost equivalent to the legends of the divine descendant bloodline. Looking at the still calm Lu Feng, Li Yongheng couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He opened his mouth and said, "Lu Feng, I really didn't expect you to be a divine descendant, and even a divine descendant with a bloodline seal. Which family do you belong to? Why are you here?" A divine descendant with a bloodline seal is definitely the most outstanding existence of a generation, a treasure that the entire family values. Logically speaking, you should be quietly cultivating in your family, waiting for your bloodline to be completely released. Lu Feng, which family do you belong to? There are too many families in the Federation, but as far as I can remember, there aren't many with the surname Lu. Listening to Li Yongheng's analysis, Lu Feng didn't say anything. Ever since the bloodline awakening, Lu Feng had guessed which family he belonged to. After all, in the entire history of the world, there was no one else who could suppress the Divine King of the Netherworld with just the power of the bloodline. Now, the family that carried his bloodline occupied an incomparably important position in the entire Federation. It was the well-deserved overlord of the entire Federation. However, Lu Feng didn't have any thoughts about this family. In fact, he didn't even remember the existence of this family. The only contact he had with this family was the unforgettable humiliation that his cousins from those 3 families had given him when they had come to find his father. Apart from that, Lu Feng didn't have any impression of this so-called family at all. Therefore, when Li Yongheng mentioned his family, Lu Feng didn't say anything. He didn't have any feelings for this so-called family. Although Li Yongheng hadn't guessed his family, Lu Feng believed that it wouldn't take long for him to figure it out. After all, there were only a few families with the surname Lu in the Federation. Lu Feng didn't want Li Yongheng to know about his relationship with this so-called family. Therefore, he said, "Yongheng, you don't have to think about it blindly. I don't even know which family I belong to. I intend to ask my father when he comes back." You don't have to ask anymore. Seeing Lu Feng's appearance, Li Yongheng didn't ask anymore. However, he didn't ask. Lu Feng asked, Yongheng, how do you know this? I believe that ordinary people are absolutely unable to come into contact with these things. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Li Yongheng was silent for a while. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a long time, he finally replied, Lu Feng, I think you should have guessed it. Yes, in fact, my family is also an aristocratic family. Ordinary people with the same surname could only form a family. Only the ancestors who had a god and condensed a divine body could be called an aristocratic family. Only the descendants could be called God's descendants. Sure enough, Lu Feng nodded gently. When Li Yongheng mentioned Wang Xiaoran before, he had such a guess, but he wasn't very sure at that time. It wasn't until Li Yongheng called out God's descendants and mentioned the bloodline seal that Lu Feng finally realized that Li Yongheng was definitely a child of an aristocratic family. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to know these things that were top secret for ordinary people. Now that he heard Li Yongheng admit it, Lu Feng naturally didn't have much doubt. Looking at Li Yongheng, Lu Feng pondered for a while. He didn't ask Li Yongheng directly, but he analyzed a little. Looking at your knowledge, it is definitely not comparable to those small families. Although there are many people with the surname Li in the Federation, there are very few who become a family. For what you said, your family is an aristocratic family. Since it is an aristocratic family, then the family must have at least given birth to a god that could condense a supreme divine body. Only in this way can their glorious bloodline continue. Then, there are many who meet this condition. Lu Feng looked at Li Yongheng with a strange light in his eyes. He said with certainty, Yongheng, are you from the Li family of the Chun Bing Galaxy or the Li family of the Yaolong Galaxy? In the entire Federation, there were many families with the surname Li, but only these two families could be called aristocratic families. Moreover, these two families weren't ordinary forces. The Li family of the Chun Bing Galaxy was a second-class family with a huge force that spread throughout the entire Chun Bing Galaxy. The Yaolong Li family was even more terrifying. They were a first-class family in the Federation, and the Yaolong Galaxy was a galaxy unique to their family. The founder of the Yaolong Li family was a heavenly god. He was even a peak heavenly god. In that era, it was almost possible for him to become a supreme being. The only families with the surname Li that Lu Feng could think of were these two. Upon hearing Lu Feng's analysis, Li Yongheng nodded gently with a faint smile in his eyes. He replied, Lu Feng, your analysis is correct. My family is the Yaolong Li family. My father is the seventh son of the current family head. In other words, the current head of the Yaolong Li family is my grandfather. Lu Feng understood and nodded gently. However, he didn't show any astonishment. If an ordinary person had heard the Yaolong Li family's name, they would have been shocked beyond words. However, Lu Feng didn't feel anything. He knew that, although he didn't like his family and didn't have any feelings for it, Lu Feng couldn't help but sigh at its power. Compared to the Yaolong Li family's god-descendant bloodline, Lu Feng's bloodline was undoubtedly much more powerful. By the way, Yongheng, you are a direct descendant of the Yaolong Li family. Logically speaking, you should more or less have the power of a god-descendant bloodline. However, why can't I feel in your body? Could it be that you are also... Lu Feng's expression changed slightly as he recalled Li Yongheng's analysis. Seeing that Lu Feng had already guessed it, Li Yongheng smiled and nodded with a faint look of pride on his face. He said, That's right. My bloodline has been sealed. The one who did it was the ancestor of my family. Chapter 95. Upon hearing this, Lu Feng nodded in relief. He finally understood why Li Yongheng's cultivation was so low despite having such a terrifying family background. According to normal calculations, as a direct descendant of the Yaolong Li family, even if Li Yongheng's talent was poor, he should have become a warrior by now. However, the reality was that he had just broken through to become a mid-level warrior. He was still far away from becoming a warrior. My body has been weak since I was born, so I have been cultivating my body all these years. I haven't put any effort into the cultivation of combat skills or cultivation methods. Therefore, my level is very low, and my comprehension of cultivation methods is also very poor. However, after more than 10 years of training, my body is also transforming in the direction of perfection. Moreover, I have a feeling that it won't take long, at most half a year, for my body to be able to withstand the impact of the bloodline awakening. At that time, I will completely transform and become an existence with the potential to break through to the ancestor realm. The ancestor of the Yaolanli family was a divine being. 5,000 years ago, during the time when the two divine kings were alternating, he was one of the most dazzling divine beings. At this moment, Li Yongheng said that once his bloodline awakened, he would have the possibility to break through to the ancestor realm. From this, it could be seen just how dense his bloodline was. Ordinary bloodline seals don't require much cultivation to withstand them. However, you have cultivated for so many years and still can't do it. Then, the density of your bloodline must be very rich. Looking at Lu Feng's eyes, Li Yongheng smiled and suddenly raised his head, putting on a proud look. He said to Lu Feng, "Of course. You know, I, Li Yongheng, am a genius, a great genius." Lu Feng curled his lips slightly, as if he was very disdainful, but the smile in his eyes betrayed him. The two of them looked at each other and felt their blood boiling. They were brothers who had grown up together. And now, when they found out that they were both God's descendants, and that they both had the chance to become gods and step into the pinnacle of the billions of living beings, they were all overjoyed. They were all overjoyed for each other and for themselves. After finishing the last bit of food, Lu Feng called the waiter to pay the bill. The Flower Garden was a top-notch hotel chain in the Federation. The quality of the service, the quality of the food, and so on were indeed worthy of the title of top-notch hotel chain in the Federation. However, behind this high quality, there was an equally high price. There were 7 dishes, and the average price of each dish was 3,000 Federation coins. This meal alone cost Lu Feng 20,000 Federation coins. Seeing this price, Li Yongheng couldn't help but click his tongue. He looked at Lu Feng and sighed. "Lu Feng, this meal cost me a year's worth of living expenses. Besides, it's still good to be rich. A poor person like me can only rely on you for food in the future." Lu Feng knew that Li Yongheng was doing this on purpose. Li Yongheng's current family might not be comparable to Lu Feng's family, but his parents' salary was also amazing. Not to mention anything else, $1 million a year was not a problem at all. And now Lu Feng knew about Li Yongheng's family background. The Li family of Yaolan. As a first-rate family in the Federation, with a bloodline of God, the power contained in this family was undoubtedly extremely terrifying. The so-called money was probably not in their eyes anymore. At this time, Lu Feng would never believe Li Yongheng that he was poor. After paying the bill, the two of them didn't stay. It was just past noon, and there was still a whole afternoon left. Both of them were warriors, and both of them were intermediate warriors. It was really no problem for them not to rest at noon. Therefore, the two of them planned to leave the hotel and go to the city to have a good understanding of Honglan City. However, just as the two of them walked to the door, they suddenly heard a voice behind them. "Huh, Lu Feng?" Hearing this voice, Lu Feng was slightly confused, but a moment later, he showed a look of realization. But it was also at this moment that the look of realization turned into a slight helplessness. However, by the time Lu Feng turned around, the smile on his face had already turned into a smile. Li Yongheng, who was next to Lu Feng, saw this and was slightly stunned. He really didn't expect that Lu Feng could change his expression so many times in such a short period of time. This was a bit exaggerated. Looking at the beautiful and elegant figure walking towards him, Lu Feng could only stand there with a helpless smile. "Mu Xun, you also came here to eat." In the distance, the person who called out to Lu Feng was Mu Xuyin. Seeing Lu Feng standing there, Mu Xuyin smiled slightly. To be honest, she was helpless with Lu Feng. Because she had met so many young talents, the only one who could really ignore her charm was Lu Feng. This was not an act. Although Mu Xuyin was only 18 years old, She was born in the Mu family and had experienced a lot since she was a child. In terms of judging people, Mu Shuyan believed that she was no worse than a 30-year-old person with rich experience. She could clearly see that Lu Feng was not deliberately pretending to attract her attention, but he really didn't care about her. Therefore, Mu Shuyan always had a very special feeling for Lu Feng. She didn't like him, but of course, she didn't hate him. It was also because of this feeling that she repeatedly lost her composure when facing Lu Feng. If it was a normal holiday, Mu Shuyan would usually enter the psychic hall in the heavenly network to work. However, today a good friend of hers desperately invited her, so she had no choice but to come out. However, Mu Shuyan didn't feel very comfortable eating this meal. Originally, she thought that her good friend was treating her, but who knew that it was someone else who was treating her? She heard from her good friend that this person was a disciple of another third-class family and was childhood sweethearts with her best friend. Therefore, she wanted to use this opportunity to introduce Mu Shuyan to him. However, who knew that it wasn't just that man who came out? Other than him, there was actually another person, and it was that person who made Mu Shuyan feel unusually uncomfortable eating this meal. When he saw Mu Shuyan at the dining table, that unrelated person was shocked. Although he didn't express anything clearly, anyone could tell that he was looking at Mu Shuyan with a burning gaze. Mu Shuyan was naturally extremely annoyed with this kind of disciple of the family. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, she didn't say much. Even now, she didn't know what that person's name was or where he came from. And it was precisely because of Mu Shuyan's attitude that this small gathering became extremely awkward. After enduring for a long time, it finally ended. Just as Mu Shuyan was about to leave and return to school, she saw a familiar figure. She didn't know why, but she unexpectedly called out Lu Feng's name again. But fortunately, she didn't recognize the wrong person this time. That figure really belonged to Lu Feng. Seeing Lu Feng standing in the same place, Mu Shuyan quickly walked up with a bright smile on her face. This was absolutely a stark contrast to the previous private room. However, Mu Shuyan didn't see that when she happily walked up to Lu Feng. Beside her, there was a gloomy gaze. Lu Feng, I didn't expect you to come here to eat. I didn't know that you were also very rich. Listening to Mu Shuyan's teasing, Lu Feng helplessly shrugged. Lu Feng didn't tell Mu Shuyan about his family situation. So until now, Mu Shuyan didn't know that his parents were high-level BUCC executives. Therefore, Lu Feng didn't find it strange at all that Mu Shuyan was surprised to see that he had the money to eat in Flower Garden. After glancing at Mu Shuyan, he said, I still have the money for a meal. But how can I compare to Miss Mo? Mu Shuyan's family was in the Tianyun Galaxy. Moreover, they were even a first-rate family in the Tianyun Galaxy. However, Mu Shuyan wasn't a disciple of the main family. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come here for a place. But even so, with her status in the family, she still had access to a huge amount of resources. This resource was a psychic's cultivation resource. Those things were far from something that could be measured with money. Therefore, with Miss Mu's status, it was no big deal for her to live in Flower Garden every day. Mu Shuyan naturally understood Lu Feng's words. But even though she understood, she was still a little unhappy when she heard those words. She pouted slightly, and it was this that made the people around her a little dazed. They had seen Mu Shuyan's cold face too many times. When had they ever seen such a playful expression? Everyone who came to their senses felt a little awkward, but Lu Feng wasn't among them. The experience of 9 lifetimes had polished his state of mind to an incomparably strong point. It was very, very difficult to shake his will. For a moment, everyone felt a little awkward, and Lu Feng didn't seem to want to waste any more time here. He had already seen the fire hidden deep in the eyes of the man behind Mu Shuyan. Although he wasn't afraid of anyone, Lu Feng wasn't an idiot. He really didn't want to provoke this kind of disaster. So, Lu Feng opened his mouth, intending to say goodbye to Mu Shuyan. But before Lu Feng could say anything, Mu Shuyan interrupted him. Lu Feng, is this your friend? Why don't you introduce him to me? Seeing that Lu Feng seemed to have the intention to leave, Mu Shuyan was a little unhappy. Compared to being with those people, Mu Shuyan preferred to be with Lu Feng. She thought for a moment and came up with a solution. Seeing that Li Yongheng was a little uneasy beside Lu Feng, Mu Shuyan smiled slightly and shifted the focus to Li Yongheng. Hearing this, Lu Feng naturally couldn't just turn around and leave without saying anything. He smiled helplessly and pointed to Li Yongheng beside him. "This is my brother who grew up with me, Li Yongheng. He's from our Federal University's Warrior Department. He's in the same grade as us." Chapter 96. After introducing Li Yongheng, Lu Feng pointed to Mu Shuyan and introduced her to Li Yongheng. She is Mu Shuyan, the eldest daughter of the Mu family in the Tianyan system. She's in the same class as me. Before Lu Feng could say anything, Li Yongheng had already reached out his hand. Seeing Li Yongheng's appearance, Lu Feng's face instantly darkened. Looking at Li Yongheng, who was enthusiastically talking to Mu Shuyan, he really had the urge to punch him. "Yongheng, it's getting late. Shouldn't we leave?" Looking at the enthusiastic Li Yongheng, Lu Feng coughed softly and wanted to pull him over. But who knew that after Lu Feng finished speaking, Li Yongheng acted as if he didn't hear anything. He was still talking and laughing with Mu Shuyan. At this time, Lu Feng finally got angry and suddenly pulled Li Yongheng over. He looked at Mu Shuyan apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, Mu Shuyan. My brother has a problem with his brain. Let's come out when we have time." After saying this, Lu Feng pulled Li Yongheng and was about to walk out. Although Li Yongheng was an intermediate warrior, he was still a little worse than Lu Fenglai. Even if he used a lot of strength, he still couldn't break free from Lu Feng's arm. In desperation, he could only be dragged away by Lu Feng. Mu Shuyan saw that Lu Feng was about to leave, and her expression changed slightly. To be honest, if Lu Feng didn't appear, she might have chosen to go back to the dormitory. But now that it was still early, Mu Shuyan had some ideas. Besides, when she saw that Lu Feng wanted to avoid her, Mu Shuyan gritted her teeth. Her mind turned slightly, and the next moment, Mu Shuyan showed a mischievous smile. Seeing that Lu Feng was about to walk out the door, Mu Shuyan suddenly called out to Lu Feng. She ran in front of Lu Feng and said, "Lu Feng, I think it's still early. Anyway, the school doesn't check on the weekend. Let's relax today. Besides, I've been in the Cymbidium for half a year, and I haven't had a good tour. Since you're the local tyrant of the Cymbidium, take me around. This is how you Cymbidium treat your guests." Lu Feng wanted to say something, but Li Yongheng beside him made Lu Feng have the urge to beat him up again. He looked at Mu Shuyan and nodded hurriedly. He said, "No problem, of course no problem. We Cymbidium people are the most hospitable. Today, I'll let Lu Feng take you around." After saying this, he poked Lu Feng, indicating that he should quickly agree. Hearing this, Lu Feng's face became more and more ugly. In fact, he really wanted to grab Li Yongheng and ask loudly, "Who is the real Cymbidium person between you and me?" Strictly speaking, whether it is Lu Feng or Li Yongheng, they're not real Cymbidium people. Lu Feng came here when he was 5 years old, and Li Yongheng is probably the same. He is a member of the Li family in the Yaolon galaxy, not a pure Cymbidium native. So what he said is a bit too much. But at this moment, Li Yongheng didn't notice Lu Feng's expression at all. He just kept trying to please Mu Shuyan and occasionally winked at Lu Feng. This time, without waiting for Lu Feng to say anything, Mu Shuyan has already agreed. She quickly went to her friend and said a few words, then went to Lu Feng's side. Looking at Lu Feng's unreconciled face, Mu Shuyan seemed to be particularly happy and said, "That's enough. I've finished talking with my friend. Let's go." After saying this, she took the lead and walked out. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng could only helplessly shake his head and raise his foot to follow. At this time, Li Yongheng suddenly appeared beside Lu Feng, gently poked Lu Feng with his arm, and said, "Lu Feng, what do you think? This girl is not bad, right? I think her family background is not bad. She should be worthy of you. I say, brother, you're not young anymore. You should consider your own problems." Without waiting for Lu Feng to say anything, Li Yongheng had already taken the lead and caught up with Mu Shuyan, walking towards the door. Seeing the two people gradually walk away, Lu Feng finally lost his emotions. He could only helplessly smile and follow Li Yongheng and Mu Shuiyan's footsteps. However, Lu Feng did not see that after they left, there was a sinister gaze. Zhao ran. Shuyan has already left. Let's continue. Seeing her best friend leave, Mu Shuiyan's friend did not seem to have any strange feelings. She just pulled her childhood friend aside and said something. Her boyfriend, naturally, did not have any objections. He turned around and said to the last man, "Young Master Feng, do you still want to come with us?" There was not much enthusiasm in his voice, and young Master Feng could hear it. He just forced a smile and said, "I won't disturb the two of you. When we have time, I'll be the host and treat you and sister-in-law properly." After saying this, young Master Feng also left. Seeing young Master Feng's figure disappear through the door, Mu Shuiyan's best friend's face turned gloomy. She looked at her boyfriend beside her and said in a slightly reproachful tone, "Zhao Ran, what kind of friend is this? It wasn't easy for me to get Shuiyan out and let you guys get to know each other, but the atmosphere was ruined by him." Hearing his girlfriend's reproach, the man named Zhao Ran helplessly spread out his hands and said, "I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Originally, I had the same plan as you. I just wanted to get to know him. Who knew that he would behave like this after seeing Mu Shuiyan?" Zhao Ran's words made Mu Shuiyan's best friend sigh helplessly. In the end, she said, "In the future, stay away from people like him." Zhao Ran nodded gently, and a trace of disgust appeared on his face. He also didn't expect that his classmate, whom he had known for less than half a year, would behave like this. I really don't know how a person like this could become the young master of the Jingyan Han family. I think that if his father wasn't so powerful, a useless person like him who can't cultivate would only end up as a money-making tool for the family. It looks like the Jingyan Han family, a second-class family, doesn't have much future. However, even the two of them didn't notice that when they left, the sky channel on Han Feng's arm flickered faintly. "Li Yongheng, are you really a Cymbidium person? We've already walked so far. Why isn't there anything interesting to see?" Unknowingly, it was already 2:30 in the afternoon. Until now, Lu Feng and the other two were still wandering around the city center. Now, Mu Shuiyan finally regretted letting Li Yongheng be her guide. Li Yongheng's expression became even more bitter when he heard Mu Shuiyan's complaints. As a warrior, he wouldn't feel hot unless he was in a really hot area. As for sweating, that was even more impossible. However, Li Yongheng was sweating profusely at the moment. He really didn't know what to say now. At first, he had agreed because of the existence of the Sky Channel. Now, however, he regretted it. This was because he realized that Mu Shuiyan seemed to know more about Honglan City than he did. Even he hadn't been to many of the places and attractions introduced on the Sky Channel, but Mu Shuiyan seemed to have been there more than once. Li Yongheng was finally at his wit's end. He looked at Lu Feng for help, hoping that he could help him. However, at this moment, Lu Feng turned his head to the side, as if the surrounding tall buildings were very interesting. Seeing this scene, Li Yongheng gritted his teeth. He kept complaining about Lu Feng in his heart. In fact, the main reason why he was so unbearable was because of Lu Feng. Of course, there was also a hint of revenge in it. Li Yongheng could see that Mu Shuiyan had a good impression of Lu Feng, but Lu Feng didn't seem to feel much. As a brother, Li Yongheng understood Lu Feng deeply. Previously, Lu Feng was hurt by Li Yan. Although Lu Feng didn't say anything, Li Yongheng could feel the disappointment and sadness that Lu Feng occasionally showed. As a brother, he naturally didn't want such a thing to happen. At this moment, Mu Shuiyan appeared. Although he didn't know which god Lu Feng's bloodline came from, Li Yongheng could vaguely feel the power of Lu Feng's bloodline. Even if the bloodline hadn't awakened, the bloodline in a sealed state was exceptionally sensitive. When his bloodline faced Lu Feng's bloodline, there was a faint tremor. This undoubtedly showed how terrifying Lu Feng's bloodline was. He believed that the ancestor of Lu Feng's bloodline was at least a god. With his bloodline sealed, even if he couldn't reach the ancestor's level, he still had a high chance of becoming a god. Ordinary women weren't good enough for Lu Feng. Mu Shuiyan's Mu family was a famous family in the Federation. Moreover, Mu Xian was the eldest daughter of the Mu family's third branch. In terms of status, she was barely worthy of Lu Feng. Coupled with her appearance, Li Yongheng was quite optimistic about the relationship between the two. Therefore, he spared no effort to matchmake them. However, he didn't expect Lu Feng to be so ungrateful. He put him in such an awkward situation at this time. He raised his head and glanced at Mu Xiuyan and found that she was glaring at him fiercely. Li Yongheng shrank his neck and hurriedly said, right away. You definitely haven't been to the next place. I promise. Hearing Li Yongheng's promise, Mu Xiuyan didn't relax. Instead, her anger rose sharply. She glared at Li Yongheng even more fiercely and said, you promise. This is the 5th time you've promised. Seeing Mu Xiuyan's anger, Li Yongheng shrank his neck again and finally muttered to himself, it's already been the 5th time? Why do I only remember 4 times? Chapter 97. Seeing how miserable Li Yongheng was, in the end, Lu Feng couldn't stand it anymore. He sighed softly and came to Mu Xiuyan's side. He said, I'm sure you've already seen all the scenic spots in the city. There's no point in looking anymore. Then let's go outside the city. It might be better there. After all, the greenery around Honglan City is the best in the entire Cymbidium. After thinking for a while, Lu Feng said, if you know a little about the Cymbidium, then you must know the most famous scenery of the Cymbidium, the mahogany forest. It's just outside Honglan City. After hearing Lu Feng's suggestion, Li Yongheng took a few deep breaths. He quickly nodded, indicating that Lu Feng was right. After hearing this suggestion, Mu Xiuyan seemed to be a little tempted. After all, she was easygoing by nature. Although she was occasionally a little playful, she still liked peace. Therefore, she was also tempted by Lu Feng's suggestion. Finally, after giving Li Yongheng a fierce look, Mu Xiuyan nodded gently. She looked at Lu Feng, smiled, and said, then I'll listen to you. I hope I won't be disappointed this time. Lu Feng also smiled, but he didn't say anything. He walked directly to the nearest public suspension car platform. Immediately after, Mu Xiuyan also walked over. Seeing that the two ignored him, Li Yongheng could only shrug helplessly and chased after them. The public suspension car in Honglan City was once every 10 minutes, and it wasn't very crowded. The 3 of them didn't wait for a few minutes before boarding the car. However, the purpose of their ride was not to go directly to the suburbs, but to the Federal University. Lu Feng planned to drive there himself. That way, he could be more casual. Neither of them had any objections to Lu Feng's suggestion. In less than 15 minutes, the 3 of them got off at the entrance of the Federal University. Lu Feng asked the 2 of them to wait for a while he went to the parking lot and drove his hover car out. Then, he pulled the 2 of them and drove straight to the suburbs. Because it was a holiday, there were obviously more people on the streets. In such a place, Lu Feng couldn't drive very fast. By the time they left Honglan City, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Sitting next to Lu Feng, she let the slight breeze in the car wash her face. At this moment, Mu Xiuyan had a strange kind of charm. Even Lu Feng had to admit that at this moment, Mu Xiuyan's heart throbbed a little. Soon, the hover car finally drove out of Honglan City. The place where the 3 of them got off the car was at the edge of a green ocean. After Lu Feng parked the hover car on the side, he came to Mu Xiuyan's side. He looked at the fallen leaves on the ground and the gradually changing color of the forest. With a hint of disappointment, he raised his hand and pointed at the tall forest in front of him. Lu Feng said to Mu Xiuyan, this is red orchid wood, a specialty of the Cymbidium. Although it doesn't have any special effects, it's still very good for viewing. In front of Lu Feng was the red orchid wood he mentioned. As Lu Feng's finger moved, Mu Xiuyan also looked around. Actually, I've heard before that there's a global red orchid forest around Honglan City, and this red orchid forest is quite famous in the Federation. I just came here today to take a look. Lu Feng looked into the distance at the boundless red orchid forest and took a deep breath. His expression was one of contentment and contentment. Seeing Lu Feng like this, Mu Shuiyan's eyes flashed with an inexplicable brilliance. Mu Shuiyan could vaguely feel that Lu Feng was different at this moment. At this moment, he was filled with a calm and peaceful temperament, which was completely opposite to his usual self. In the past, although Lu Feng was humble and even very indifferent, Mu Shuiyan could still clearly feel that Lu Feng was full of a sense of sharpness. Even if he tried to hide it, that sense of sharpness could not be completely hidden. Of course, she did not feel that there was anything wrong with Lu Feng having such a sense of sharpness. After all, if young people did not have a sense of sharpness, they would lose the heart to forge ahead. Therefore, when she saw the really calm and indifferent Lu Feng at this time, Shuiyan had a different feeling. Do you want to go in and take a look? Although the red orchid wood does not have any special effects, it is quite good at purifying the air. The air inside should be much better than outside. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Mu Shuiyan was slightly stunned. This was the first time Lu Feng had invited her. After being stunned for a moment, she quickly recovered. She smiled and nodded with a tranquil expression. Lu Feng turned around and looked at Li Yongheng, who had just gotten out of the car, and asked, "Yongheng, do you want to go in and take a look?" Lu Feng knew that Li Yongheng was not very fond of these natural landscapes. That was why he asked this question. When Li Yongheng heard Lu Feng's words, he shook his head gently and said, "I wonder what's so good about these broken pieces of wood. It's not like you don't know that I don't like these. You and Miss Mu will go in. I'll go out for a ride myself." Lu Feng did not force Li Yongheng. He took out the car key from his pocket and threw it to him. "Don't go shopping too much and forget about us. Remember to come and pick us up later." With the key in hand, Li Yongheng naturally did not pay attention to Lu Feng. Today was a bit too uncomfortable for him. In the afternoon, Mu Shuiyan rolled her eyes at him, which made Li Yongheng uncomfortable. Now that he finally had a chance to enjoy the fun of racing, he was naturally overjoyed. He casually said a few words to Lu Feng and directly opened the car door and left. Seeing Li Yongheng leave excitedly, Lu Feng smiled helplessly. Mu Shuiyan had already walked over. She glanced at Lu Feng and smiled. "It seems that your relationship is very good." Lu Feng nodded gently and replied, "When I came here at the age of 5, the first friend I met was Eternal. I remember when I was bullied when I was young. It was Eternal who helped me every time. It can be said that although we are not related by blood, our relationship is closer than that of brothers." After saying this, Lu Feng smiled and pointed to the red orchid forest in front of him. He said, "Mu Shuiyan, since you are already here, let's go in and take a look." Mu Shuiyan nodded and followed Lu Feng into the forest. "Uncle Zhang, have you found them?" Not long after Lu Feng and Mu Shuiyan entered the red orchid forest, a figure suddenly appeared in the place where they had just left. It was a middle-aged man with a powerful aura surrounding him. He floated quietly in the air with a deep look in his eyes. Beside him, there was a three-dimensional shadow suspended in midair. If Lu Feng and Mu Shuiyan had not left, they would definitely recognize the person in the projection. He was a young master of the Han family, Han Feng. Upon hearing Han Feng's words, Uncle Zhang nodded gently and said, "Young master, according to the location information you gave me, I tracked them here. If I'm not wrong, they should be less than 3,000 meters away from me now." Han Feng in the projection heard this and nodded viciously. He looked at Uncle Zhang in front of him and said again, "Uncle Zhang, kill the 2 men and bring the woman back. Remember, you have to do it secretly. After all, the Cymbidium is surging with the arrival of the people from the Federal University. There are many powerful people here, so you have to be careful." Uncle Zhang didn't say anything and only nodded gently. Then, the projection ended. Uncle Zhang looked at the sky network in his hand and felt a little disappointed. With such a young master, the Han family will be in danger in the future. Poor family head, who has a great reputation, abandoned his principles and chose such an incompetent person to be the young master of the Han family. How sad, how sad. Just because he fancied a woman, he wanted to kill her. If this was in the Jingyan system, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, in that place, the Han clan was the law and the Tao. They were existences that stood above everything else. However, this wasn't the Jingyan system. It wasn't even the headquarters of any family. Here, the Federation was the most powerful master. Although it was impossible for there to be any powerful people on a level 3 life planet that could threaten them, if the Federation found out, the family would be in trouble again. I hope these two people really don't have any background like the young master said. Lu Feng, have you been living in the Cymbidium since you were young? What do your parents do for a living? Unknowingly, the two of them had walked very far away. Perhaps it was because of the surrounding environment, but gradually, Lu Feng didn't resist Mu Shuiyin too much. The conversation between the two of them also gradually increased. The two of them chatted for a long time and finally talked about their families. Mu Shuiyin still remembered that she had already told Lu Feng about her situation, but she didn't seem to know anything about Lu Feng. Therefore, Mu Shuiyin took this opportunity to ask directly. Hearing this, Lu Feng's footsteps paused slightly. Then, he smiled gently and said, "My parents are very good among the commoners. However, in the eyes of people like you, especially the children of aristocratic families, they are really nothing. My parents are both employees of the BUCC Corporation, but they work on planet Zhouyue in the Zhouyue system." Mu Shuiyin's footsteps paused slightly. There was a strange look on her face. Naturally, she knew about the BUCC Corporation. It was a huge corporation that spanned across galaxies. Its power was terrifying and spread to every corner of the Federation. Even other races had many of their business partners. Chapter 98. It's no exaggeration to say that the BUCC Consortium is definitely one of the top forces in the Federation. Maybe because of their heritage, they can't compare to the 8 great clans, but ordinary first-class families can't compare to them. Looking at the entire Federation, there are only 2 or 3 consortiums that can compete with the BUCC Consortium except for the 8 great clans. And Lu Feng's parents are actually from the BUCC Consortium. Of course, if they're just ordinary BUCC employees, it's really not a big deal. After all, the number of direct employees under BUCC is probably in the hundreds of millions or even billions. And an ordinary employee is not a big deal. But Mu Shuiyin understands that Lu Feng's parents are not ordinary employees. Otherwise, why would he work on the Zhouyu star system's Zhouyu planet? The Zhouyu galaxy is the galaxy where the BUCC headquarters is located, and the Zhouyu galaxy is the real headquarters developed and built by BUCC. The Zhouyu planet is not big. It's only a third-class life planet, but the BUCC employees who can work there are undoubtedly not very important. Being able to work there is enough to explain some of the problems. Of course, although Mu Shuiyin knows this, she didn't say it out loud. She just quietly listened to Lu Feng talk there. Actually, I'm not a pure Cymbidium, because I came here when I was 5 years old. But I've lived here for more than 10 years. I'm already used to this place. Gradually, Lu Feng began to talk about some of his childhood things, and Mu Shuiyin just listened quietly. She seems to enjoy this kind of feeling. It's just that Lu Feng's words are also very measured. He had never mentioned anything about his own cultivation base and cultivation. Because Lu Feng is not stupid, he knows that Mu Shuiyin is not stupid either. As long as he says it, with Mu Shuiyin's knowledge and wisdom, she will definitely be able to figure out the problem with his bloodline. Later, I enter high school, and at that time, Yongheng and I were in the same class. In the beginning, we were full of yearning for high school life, but who knew that the modern world is always cruel? The month-long military training made many people feel very uncomfortable. I still remember that at that time, in order to avoid the military training, Yongheng and I, suddenly, Lu Feng's voice stopped abruptly. Mu Shuiyin is also slightly stunned. She looked at Lu Feng, who stopped walking and also stopped. Looking at Lu Feng's strange expression, Mu Shuiyin showed a look of confusion. She asked, "What happened between you and Li Yongheng?" But this time, Lu Feng didn't answer her. He didn't even look at her. At this time, Mu Shuiyin also seemed to realize something. Because at this moment, Lu Feng's expression was extremely gloomy. Lu Feng, what happened? Hearing this, Lu Feng didn't answer. He was still the same as before. He looked around as if he was looking for something. After a while, Lu Feng finally spoke. His voice was so loud that it spread over a radius of 100 meters around the entire forest. Who are you? What are you doing here? Mu Shuyan woke up with a start. She looked around in a panic, but she didn't find anything. At this moment, she showed a look of suspicion. After all, she was an advanced psychic, and Lu Feng was only a beginner psychic. If Lu Feng could find out, then she should be able to find out as well. However, Lu Feng completely ignored Mu Shuyan's expression. At this moment, he was looking around nervously, his body slightly tense, ready to attack at any time. Lu Feng really did feel it. After the trip to the ancient Feng clan's altar, his own perception had been raised to an unimaginable level. Just now, he felt a dangerous aura approaching. It was the feeling of being maliciously spied on. This feeling almost made Lu Feng's blood freeze. Time passed by minute, just when Mu Shuyan thought that Lu Feng was playing with her. A burst of laughter suddenly pierced through the sky. I didn't expect you to be able to feel my presence. A mere ant can actually sense my existence. This is truly too shocking. The moment the voice fell, a figure slowly descended from the sky. Seeing this scene, Mu Shuyan's face turned pale. Although she didn't know who the person in front of her was, she understood one thing. Walking on air, an existence that could ignore gravity, regardless of whether it was a psychic or a warrior, had already surpassed the limits of ordinary people. At the very least, it had to be a warrior or a psychic grandmaster. Such an existence's status was already considered very high, even in her family. At this moment, such an existence had actually appeared in the forest of an ordinary third-grade life planet. This made Mu Shuyan panic. She naturally understood that this person was coming for them. Otherwise, Lu Feng wouldn't have such an expression. It was as if a virtual staircase had appeared in the void. That existence stepped on these virtual stairs and walked down step by step from the endless void. Every step was a condensation of a kind of aura, and every step was a kind of enhancement of a kind of willpower. A terrifying majesty was blooming, and a kind of extreme power was awakening. By the time he was halfway down, Mu Shuyan's face had already turned pale. It was true that she was a psychic, and she was even an advanced psychic. Her mind power had reached a terrifying 750 units. This kind of mind power was already one of the best among all the psychic students. However, at this moment, the things that she was proud of were so fragile, as if they couldn't withstand a single blow in front of this warrior. In an instant, all of her pride was smashed into pieces, and she couldn't resist at all. Finally, when the Venerable One took the next step, Mu Shuyan had already fallen to the ground. At this moment, she thought of her guardian. However, when she took out the Sky Network, she realized that the surroundings had been completely blocked out at some point in time. One step, another step. At the end of the journey, every step caused the space to fluctuate, causing everything within a 100-meter radius to tremble along with his footsteps. Lu Feng looked at him coldly, allowing that terrifying aura to continuously wash over him, allowing this extreme power to affect everything in the surrounding space. However, he didn't move even once, and he didn't show even the slightest hint of fear. The moment the Venerable One walked to the ground, all of the strange phenomena disappeared. The entire world was no longer filled with the terrifying turbulence from before, and there was no longer that terrifying majesty that made one's heart palpitate. The only thing that seemed to exist was that terrifying existence. He only glanced at Mu Shuyan, who had fallen to the ground beside him, and didn't continue to pay attention to her. At this moment, there was only Lu Feng in his eyes, and only the figure that was as steady as a rock despite the violent storm. A trace of approval flashed in his eyes, and the Venerable One praised, "I didn't expect that an ant-like existence could actually block my aura. Your willpower is really terrifying. Although I don't know what your aptitude is like with such willpower, so what if your aptitude isn't good? If you're given time, I believe that you'll definitely be as powerful in the future. He wasn't stingy with his words of praise at all. However, Lu Feng remained silent. Two different lights gradually burned in his eyes. He was making his final preparations. Who exactly are you? We didn't offend you, so why are you causing trouble for us? Mu Xuyan was a little flustered, but after all, she was the eldest daughter of the first-rate Mu family. Although she was only from a branch family, she had seen and experienced a lot of things since she was young. Therefore, she had already forced herself to calm down. The venerable one in front of her didn't make any moves, and even kept praising Lu Feng. However, Mu Xuyan knew that he had come with a murderous intent. From that calm body of his, there was an endless and strong murderous intent. This was something that couldn't be concealed. When he heard Mu Xuyan's words, the venerable one only smiled. He glanced at Mu Xuyan again and nodded gently. He said slowly, "Actually, you're not wrong, and so is he. It's a pity that you look like this, so it's a mistake. It's a big mistake." He didn't continue, because both Lu Feng and Mu Xuyan already understood. Lu Feng sighed softly. He knew that he was in an undeserved calamity. He had long understood that getting involved with such a beautiful woman was destined to be troublesome before he was strong enough. However, who would have thought that he would get himself killed in just a few days? So who sent you? This was the only thing Lu Feng wanted to ask. It was also the only thing he could ask. However, it was a pity that the venerable one only smiled and shook his head gently in response to Lu Feng's question. Lu Feng knew that he wouldn't tell him. In the end, Lu Feng took a deep breath and looked at the venerable one again. Then, he moved slowly and arrived in front of Mu Xuyan. At that moment, the light in his eyes was burning intensely. Two different kinds of intent were growing inside him, which made the Zun cultivator's heart skip a beat. Lu Feng took one last look at Mu Xuyan behind him and said softly, "In a while, I'll try my best to hold him back. You leave this place and inform the school immediately." Although he's a venerable one, many of the new teachers in the school can suppress him. Upon hearing Lu Feng's words, a complicated look flashed across Mu Xuyan's eyes. This time, it was because of her that Lu Feng was dragged into this. It could be said that if it wasn't for her, Lu Feng wouldn't be in any danger at all. However, at this moment when danger came, the person standing in front of her and fighting for her life was Lu Feng. It was the person whom she didn't have much contact with, and who was even implicated by her. In an instant, the situation changed Mu Xuyan's heart slowly. Chapter 99. Lu Feng. He's a martial artist while you're only a beginner psychic master. There's an insurmountable gap between the two of you. I don't even have the ability to fight back against him. Although I don't know how you managed to withstand his power, you're definitely no match for him. I understand your good intentions. I'm sorry that I've implicated you this time. In that case, I'll definitely not run away. I'll choose to be with you and bear all the consequences. At this moment, Mu Xuyan's eyes flashed with a trace of determination. She swayed as if she wanted to stand up. Unfortunately, the aura she had just received was too terrifying. Given her weak body as a psychic master, she simply couldn't bear it. Therefore, at this moment, she struggled for a long time, but ultimately failed to stand up. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng sighed softly. He reached out his hand and helped the frail body up. He let Mu Xuyan lean on his side quietly. Feeling the scorching temperature of Lu Feng's body, a rare blush appeared on Mu Xuyan's pale face. Finally, she looked at Lu Feng with a complicated gaze, then turned her gaze to the venerable warrior in the distance. "I know that the person behind you wants me. All of this has nothing to do with Lu Feng. Of course, I also understand that it's absolutely impossible for you to let him go just like that. However, what if you use me as an exchange? Is that okay?" The martial artist looked at Mu Xuyan quietly and suddenly burst into laughter. Seeing him like this, both Lu Feng and Mu Xuyan frowned slightly. After a long time, he finally stopped and pointed at Mu Xuyan with a mocking look on his face. "You and him are now in my hands. What else can you do? Use what I have to exchange for something else. If it were you, would you make such a deal? The mocking look in his eyes became more intense. However, in the face of his mockery, Mu Shuiyin calmed down. After a while, she smiled gently. However, this smile was also full of sarcasm. I really wonder if the person who sent you here was an idiot. Could it be that he didn't even clearly state my identity? Identity? What identity? A trace of doubt and seriousness appeared on the martial artist's face. At this moment, he finally felt that something was wrong. Think about it. Would an ordinary person without any background be so calm when facing a venerable warrior? She could even open her mouth and state her conditions. When he came here previously, Han Feng told him that these two people were children from ordinary families without any background. However, at this moment, it seemed that something was wrong. Such a calm temperament was definitely not something an ordinary child from an ordinary family could possess. Mu Shuiyin and Lu Feng both saw the change in the martial artist's expression. At this moment, a glimmer of light flashed across Mu Shuyin's eyes. She seemed to have understood something. Although her face was still pale, she was calmer. She looked at the martial artist and said slowly, "It seems that your master lied to you and didn't tell you my identity. I'm an advanced-level psychic. Think about it. An 18-year-old who became an advanced-level psychic. Would I be an ordinary person?" Mu Shuyin's words were like a heavy hammer that smashed deeply into the venerable warrior's heart. His expression became even more unsightly as he asked in a slightly gloomy voice, "Who exactly are you?" The existence of a psychic was much more precious than that of a martial artist. At the same time, the cultivation of a psychic was many times more difficult. The cost of nurturing an advanced-level psychic was definitely not less than the cost of nurturing a martial artist in the upheaval period. If one had the qualifications to become an advanced-level psychic, one could naturally become a martial artist if he was a martial artist. Not to mention an ordinary family. Even an ordinary third-rate family wouldn't be able to nurture a 17 or 18-year-old martial artist, even if they tried their best. To be able to produce such a genius, one had to be from a second-rate family at the very least. To be able to develop her talent to such an extent at the age of 17 or 18, even an ordinary second-rate family wouldn't be able to do it. To be able to achieve this level, only a second-rate family would be able to do it, or directly, a first-rate family. Mu Shuiyin smiled slightly. Under the contrast of her pale face, she appeared particularly delicate and beautiful. At this moment, she had regained the pride of an aristocratic family's child. Looking at the venerable warrior, Mu Shuiyin said indifferently, "I don't know if you've heard of the Mu family of Tianyun." The moment he heard this, the martial artist's face twisted. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Mu Shuiyin, but didn't say anything. When Mu Shuiyin saw him like this, she smiled gently and said with a kind of bone-deep pride, "That's right, I'm a child of the Mu family." At this moment, Lu Feng could clearly see the venerable warrior's body trembling slightly. He understood that this martial artist had been deceived by his master. What Lu Feng thought, Mu Shuiyin naturally thought of as well. Seeing the martial artist's appearance, Mu Shuiyin's eyes flashed with a trace of joy. She continued, "I think you're also a person with a family. You should understand that with my status, I'll definitely be strictly protected in my family. As a family with the inheritance of psychics, we, the descendants of gods, have methods that you can't understand. In my soul, there's a brand that this family set up. As long as I die here, everything that happened before will be recorded. If it weren't for my negligence this time, I'm afraid that my protector would have already appeared and obliterated you. I'm not afraid to tell you that my protector is also a martial artist, and he's a beginner in the upheaval period. Once I die with my status and aptitude, it's enough to trigger the appearance of a god master in my family. When that time comes, even if you run to the ends of the earth, you won't be able to escape our Mu family's pursuit. Once we find out the power behind you, even if your family is a first-rate family like our Mu family, we won't be lenient." Every word struck the heart and shook the soul. With just a few simple words, the martial artist's face showed a color that only appeared when Mu Shuiyin was seriously injured. At this moment, he was deathly pale. At this moment, Mu Xian struck while the iron was hot and continued. If you can let him go, then I'm willing to give up resistance and let you do whatever you want with me. Otherwise, even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. I'll make you and the power behind you pay a sufficient price. At this moment, Mu Xian's voice was already stern. This was the last and only way she could think of to save Lu Feng. If the martial artist didn't accept the threat, then her and Lu Feng's fate would become tragic. The martial artist stood in the same place, his expression constantly distorted and changed. Lu Feng and Mu Xian looked at him quietly. The only difference was that Mu Xian had a kind of hope, while Lu Feng had a kind of determination. Lu Feng understood that although Mu Xian was very intelligent, she was still an 18-year-old girl. She had underestimated human nature. Finally, perhaps after an endless period of waiting, or perhaps after a moment of waiting, the martial artist smiled. Seeing his smile, Mu Xian finally showed a trace of despair. This was because this smile was filled with a kind of madness. The martial artist looked at Lu Feng and Mu Xian and laughed softly. Then he said slowly, "Actually, I also understand that by accepting this mission, I'm doomed no matter what. If I let him go, then through him, I will still be found by the Mu family in the future. If I don't let him go and hand you over to the people behind me, then if you die, the power behind me will still suffer the Mu family's revenge. I'm afraid that my end will be even more tragic. Since I'll die regardless of whether I let him go or not, then what choice do I have? He asked me to come here, but he didn't tell me your identity. This is simply asking me to accept a mission that will surely kill me. Why should I be loyal to their family? So, in order to bury them with me, all of you will die together." A trace of bloodthirsty light flashed in the martial artist's eyes. When he saw this scene, Lu Feng reached out his arm and hugged Mu Xian tightly. He sighed softly, knowing that there was no turning back. From the martial artist's words, Lu Feng could hear the martial artist's intense hatred. The martial artist was already filled with incomparable hatred towards the people who had lined up to send him to his death. Therefore, what he wanted to do most now was to bury the power behind him with them. If he let Lu Feng and Mu Xian go, then the power behind him would just casually come up with a reason to hand this martial artist over and compensate them. Perhaps this would be the end of the matter. However, if he killed Mu Xian, then the Mu family would definitely take the craziest revenge. And this was what he planned to do. When they saw the martial artist's crazed expression, Lu Feng thought of the reason. Mu Xian also thought of it. Finally, her body could no longer support itself and slowly leaned into Lu Feng's arms. At this moment, Mu Xian was filled with sorrow. Finally, she seemed to have thought of something. She lifted her head and looked at Lu Feng with a complicated expression. Then, she said slowly, "Lu Feng, I still have a last resort and a trump card. Remember, when you get out, inform my family and ask them to help me take revenge." After saying this, Mu Xian wanted to push Lu Feng away. However, at this moment, she realized that her body could not move at all. She lifted her head and looked at the face that was so close to her with a puzzled expression. Lu Feng felt Mu Xian's gaze. He lowered his head and smiled gently at her beautiful face. "I'm sorry to have wronged you for the time being." When she heard Lu Feng's words, Mu Xian struggled slightly. However, she realized that her body had been completely restrained. His entire body was unable to move even the slightest bit. She knew that this was Lu Feng's method. But why did he do this? Chapter 100. Lu Feng could feel Mu Xian's constant struggle, confusion, and despair. However, at this point, how could Lu Feng just let it go? Since when did he, Lu Feng, have to stand behind others and be protected by others? He lowered his head and gently hugged Mu Xian in his arms. Lu Feng's voice was extremely low, almost right next to Mu Xian's ear. "I know what you're planning. You have the bloodline of the Mu family, and the ancestor of the Mu family was a great sage master from a distant era. Your Mu family is a family of divine descendants. I know that as divine descendants, we all have a special secret technique. It's a supreme technique that everyone knows, but no one dares to use. And this secret technique is to ignite the bloodline and summon the ancestors. I believe that you're planning to use this secret technique. Mu Xuyan looked at Lu Feng and temporarily forgot everything. She didn't know how Lu Feng knew about this. That's right. She had indeed planned to use this last forbidden technique to help Lu Feng win a chance to escape. But she didn't expect Lu Feng to know everything. Seeing Mu Xuyan's expression, Lu Feng knew that he had guessed correctly. Lu Feng hugged Mu Xuyan tightly, feeling touched. Although all this was caused by Mu Xuyan, Lu Feng would never blame others. Because he was Lu Feng. I understand what you're thinking, but I can't let you do this. I'm Lu Feng. My name is Lu Feng. I really can't let you block all the disasters for me. I'm Lu Feng. I'm the one and only Lu Feng among the billions of races in the entire universe. When have I ever needed anyone to shelter me from the wind and rain? When have I ever needed someone to hold up the sky for me? When have I ever needed others to sacrifice everything just so that I could live on? I, Lu Feng, cannot do it. I can't do it. Therefore, even if I die, I will die standing. I will not let anyone fall in front of me in order to protect me. Lu Feng's words stunned Mu Xuyan. At this moment, her heart was filled with confusion and emptiness. The only thing that existed was a blurry figure. His existence held up the world. His existence broke through the chaos. Gradually, that figure began to become clear. Mu Xuyan saw it. She finally saw the face of that figure. Lu Feng. That was Lu Feng. His back held up the world. In this moment of despair, in this moment of withering, Lu Feng used his hands to hold up her sky and separate her earth. At this moment, Mu Xuyan was in a daze. She just stared blankly at Lu Feng. Lu Feng looked quietly at Mu Xuyan, who was in a daze. He had a strange expression on his face as he slowly said, "To be honest, Xuyan, you are really beautiful. I'm not being perfunctory. I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. If there's a chance, I might really pursue you. I hope that you won't reject me too harshly when the time comes." Gradually, Lu Feng released his hands. At some point, a crystal had appeared in front of Mu Xuyan's chest. It floated quietly in front of Mu Xuyan's chest, as if protecting something. Lu Feng looked at the crystal with a strange expression. This crystal had been given to him by young Master Luo half a year ago. According to young Master Luo, this crystal could produce an extremely strong force to protect the user when it was injured. The moment the crystal shattered, young Master Luo's family would also sense it. The true powerhouses of their family would travel across galaxies to save the user. At that time, a mere martialist would no longer be a cause for fear. Lu Feng had never doubted young Master Luo's words. After all, young Master Luo was at the peak of the younger generation. There was no need for him to lie to himself. Now, Lu Feng had revealed his final trump card. He had already given up on any hope. Lu Feng wanted to face everything head-on. He didn't need anyone to sacrifice themselves for him. This was given to me by a friend of mine. He said that this crystal could help me escape from most of the powerhouses. Then I believe that it will definitely be able to protect you until the people from their family arrive. Remember, when the time comes, you have to tell them to help me take revenge. There wasn't much sorrow in his voice. In fact, there was even a hint of playfulness. However, when she heard this, Mu Xuyan's face revealed a sorrowful expression. She understood that Lu Feng was going to sacrifice himself to ensure her survival. She wanted to say something, but she realized that she couldn't utter a single word. Even though she usually had a lot to say, she felt as though something was stuck in her throat at this moment. Mu Xuyan stared blankly at Lu Feng. In the end, she was still in a daze. Finally, Lu Feng put her down on a patch of woodland. Her back was leaning against a huge red orchid tree. As for the crystal, it floated quietly in front of her chest, flickering with a strange light. After everything was done, Lu Feng let out a sigh of relief. Heaven was the most gentle gaze in the world. It contained all things, and gave people an eternal sense of warmth and security. However, when he turned around, everything changed. It changed completely. Heaven was on the front, but the back was an abyss. Lu Feng had never shown his terrifying side to those he was familiar with. He would only show his terror to the living beings that needed to go down into the abyss. Step by step, he took one step after another. Every step was unusually resolute. It was a sublimation of his courageous aura. The glow in Lu Feng's eyes seemed to have solidified. There were two completely different kinds of splendor in his eyes. One was called insanity, endless insanity. The other was called insanity, unparalleled sharpness. Lu Feng was the combination of insanity and sharpness. Xuyan, you must be wondering why I know about the existence of bloodline taboo techniques. Mu Xuyan watched Lu Feng's back as he walked forward step by step. Although she listened to him, she couldn't say or do anything. Finally, when Lu Feng reached his original position, he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the martialist in front of him, who had a mocking expression on his face, and smiled gently. However, this smile made the martialist's heart palpitate inexplicably. He even unconsciously took a step back, because within those eyes of madness and sharpness, there was actually a trace of red that made even his heart palpitate and tremble. That was a brilliant red that thirsted for blood. Then, I will tell you now. I will tell you the reason why I know all this. Gradually, Lu Feng's body started to tremble. However, this wasn't a tremor caused by fear. Instead, it was a powerful impact that Lu Feng's body couldn't adapt to. In an instant, Lu Feng's body actually started to crack. Countless bright red colors gradually appeared on Lu Feng's body. That was blood. That was Lu Feng's blood. Soon his body was soaked in blood. Upon seeing this, both the martialist and Mu Xuyan were completely shocked. At this moment, Lu Feng's voice slowly came from the blood-red figure. Because I am also a divine descendant. A divine descendant. Lu Feng was actually a divine descendant. He actually had the bloodline of a divine descendant. Upon seeing this, the martialist unconsciously took another step back. His face was filled with madness and fear. However, in the next moment, he suddenly burst in a laughter filled with boundless arrogance. A divine descendant? So what if you are a divine descendant? Even if you used a bloodline taboo technique and ignited your bloodline, so what? I can feel it. You are a warrior, but only a mid-level warrior. Even if your bloodline is inherited from the Divine King, so what? There is an insurmountable gap between you and me. You will never be able to defeat me. Lu Feng didn't say anything. He just allowed the terrifying will to burn and the blood to fill the air. At this moment, because of the extreme burning of his bloodline, Lu Feng was experiencing unimaginable pain. His proud head was lowered. No one could see Lu Feng's scarlet eyes at this moment. Upon hearing the martialist's words, Mu Xuyan's burning hope was instantly extinguished. She knew that the martialist wasn't wrong. Even if Lu Feng's bloodline was inherited from the Divine King, so what? His opponent was a martialist who stood in the powerful realm of a warrior. Lu Feng was only a mid-level warrior. Even if he ignited all his bloodline, how much power could his body bear? How much pain could his will bear? Even those who had the bloodline of the Divine King, who shook the Federation, had ignited their bloodline and reached their limits. At best, they could only break through to become a high-level warrior and be able to compete with a high-level warrior at the peak. Between a warrior and a martialist, there was an insurmountable gap. That was a gap that couldn't be filled even by the burning of one's bloodline. Among thousands of peak warriors, only one could become a martialist. A martialist could already evolve the martial path incarnation and condense the power of heaven and earth in his body. His existence was already beyond the imagination of any high-level warrior. Every movement carried the supreme power of heaven and earth. Even if it was only the power of one star, the effect of the explosion was no less than the power of dozens or even hundreds of stars of power. So at this moment, Mu Xuyan seemed to have seen the scene of Lu Feng's death. Silently, tears slid down her cheeks. As the eldest daughter of the Mu family, she was extremely talented and beautiful. It could be said that she was doted on by thousands of people. Although she was only from a side branch, her status in the Mu family was no less than those of the direct descendants. However, even if she had that status, even if she had more glory, what could she do? At this moment, she was the most ordinary person, and the person who was protecting her was the figure who was on the verge of collapse. Chapter 101. The martialist wasn't in a hurry to make a move. As he watched the trembling Lu Feng, his crazed eyes were filled with mockery. He didn't make a move, not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to see how far Lu Feng could go. Lu Feng's body had already been soaked in blood. It seemed like he would collapse in the next moment. The martialist clearly preferred to personally kill Lu Feng. He wanted to see Lu Feng completely shatter because he couldn't bear it. Two god descendants, ha ha ha. Since you sent me to my death, I want to see whether the Han family can bear the crazy revenge of two god descendant families. Burn, keep burning. Let me see how terrifying your willpower is, how strong your body is, and how much power you can bear. Boundless pain invaded every corner of Lu Feng's body. Even his soul was suffering the most agonizing torment. This was an indescribable pain that was strangling both his physical body and his heart. However, Lu Feng didn't show any signs of stopping. He was still burning frantically and steaming crazily. Lu Feng knew that this wasn't enough. Although he had already thought of his own ending, Lu Feng wasn't willing to accept it. He didn't want to die in vain like this. Lu Feng had never been a person who would yield. Therefore, he wanted to fight. He wanted to sublimate all his combat strength. He wanted to end his life with the most glorious stroke of glory. I am of his bloodline. In the past, he had roamed the universe unhindered and was invincible. He was the greatest existence of this era. If he could do this, how could I, whose bloodline is closest to his, give up just like that? Not enough. Not enough. This is far from enough. Burn, burn, continue burning frantically for me. Lu Feng went completely crazy. He forgot himself, forgot the pain, forgot the danger, forgot everything. At this moment, his eyes were filled with a crazed battle intent and bloodthirst that had reached its peak. The mid-level warrior's extreme barrier arrived and shattered in an instant. In an instant, Lu Feng broke through. He had become a high-order intermediate warrior and a peak-level intermediate warrior. In the blink of an eye, Lu Feng's shocking and powerful shackles had been shattered, and he had directly entered the ranks of high-level warriors. Such a powerful advancement made people tremble. Even the Venerable One was slightly frightened at this moment. Although he was still crazy, it didn't mean that he had lost his mind. It was precisely this thought that made his thoughts even clearer at this moment. Lu Feng had such a terrifying breakthrough. It wasn't that he hadn't heard of it. Naturally, he understood the significance of this. Among the mid-level warriors, if they were able to cross a large level just by burning their bloodline, then Lu Feng's bloodline primogeniture was probably at least a god who was close to becoming a virtual king. Once such a celestial god left behind a bloodline, that force would at least be a first-rate force. At this moment, the Zun cultivator's heart was trembling slightly, but he was also feeling a kind of joy. He knew that this time, the Han family was in danger, because what they had to face was the joint destructive revenge of two first-rate clans. Lu Feng's body was trembling to the limit, and his muscles were showing unnatural spasms. Just looking at him, one could feel that kind of boundless pain. Mu Xuyan closed her eyes. She really couldn't bear it anymore. She really couldn't bear to watch anymore. Such pain made her feel heartbroken. But it wasn't over yet, because Lu Feng knew that he could still improve. He hadn't reached his limit yet. This kind of strength was not enough, far from enough. Just as Lu Feng was attacking the shackles of a high-order advanced warrior, his body finally couldn't help but start to collapse. At this moment, the only thing that could support Lu Feng was his willpower, his final willpower. At this moment, Lu Feng raised his head. It was an indescribable pair of pupils, a pair of eyes that made people tremble endlessly after seeing it. Again, still not enough. It's still happening, it's still happening. Relying on the last of his willpower, Lu Feng finally broke through that layer of shackles. He had entered the ranks of a high-order advanced warrior. Looking at Lu Feng's appearance, that venerable sucked in a breath of cold air, his body trembling again. Because he saw an inconceivable scene. Lu Feng relied on his bloodline. He actually advanced by an entire rank. He actually entered the ranks of a high-order advanced warrior. How is this possible? This is absolutely impossible. An entire rank. He actually advanced by an entire rank. This is no longer something that can be achieved by willpower. His bloodline is actually so noble. He actually has the bloodline of the Divine King. The bloodline of the Divine King. Only the bloodline of the Divine King could achieve such a terrifying degree of improvement. He couldn't imagine that Lu Feng actually had the bloodline of the Divine King. The bloodline of the Divine King. Then the family he belonged to, could it be a super family? The pinnacle. Lu Feng had already reached the pinnacle of his life. He felt that his physical body had already surpassed the limit. Lu Feng understood that if he practiced the Great Devil True Body at this time, the effect would definitely be terrifying. But now, he wasn't practicing. He was staking everything to fight for a future for himself. Feeling the peak power in his body, Lu Feng didn't stop. He knew that it was still not enough. The strength of a high-order advanced warrior was no different from an ant to a venerable warrior. Therefore, he still needed to continue to improve. Finally, Lu Feng used his final trump card. He didn't hold back in the slightest. Great Devil True Body. Boundless bronze light was born. It was just that within this bronze light, there were countless strands of golden light. This was the power of the Great Devil that had fused into Lu Feng's bloodline. This was the brand new Great Devil True Body. The Great Devil Bronze Body was used for the first time after Lu Feng became an intermediate warrior and Lu Feng reached the first realm of the Great Devil True Body, the realm of the Bronze Great Devil. Behind him, a terrifying image was born, breaking through the barriers of heaven and earth, and actually appeared between heaven and earth. It kept roaring, as if it was the supreme holy emperor of all things. In an instant, the wind and clouds gathered, and heaven and earth changed colors. An ancient aura appeared from the sky, from the ground, from the free air, and from the existence of space. They gathered and constantly integrated into the bronze Great Devil virtual body behind Lu Feng. On Lu Feng's body, in addition to the endless bright red, a bronze light mixed with gold also appeared, and it was at this moment that his blood boiled once again. In an instant, or perhaps it was an eternity, the realm broke through again. Lu Feng actually rushed to the peak. At this moment, he was really standing at the peak of the advanced warrior realm. Nobody had seen such a terrifying increase before, and that martialist had never even heard of it. However, everything really happened just like that. Lu Feng trembled. If it hadn't been for the support of the Great Devil Bronze Body, he would have been smashed to pieces. Even so, every tiny movement he made was accompanied by boundless pain. However, he didn't give up or retreat in the slightest. After accepting such a powerful force, Lu Feng finally wanted to fight. Without the slightest hesitation, Lu Feng made his first move against that martialist. In an instant, the imposing aura stirred up between heaven and earth. The powerful fist wind even directly affected the tall red orchid trees within a 100-meter radius. All of them were uprooted and sent flying towards that martialist. If such a blow was placed in a city, it could easily knock down a 100-meter tall building. At this moment, in this forest, with the help of countless trees, the power was even more terrifying. In the face of such a massacre, that martialist didn't show the slightest reaction. All he did was raise his arm and wave it gently. In the next moment, the smoke and dust in the sky disappeared, and the countless flying trees also disappeared. Everything was strangely still and completely quiet. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng's incomparably bloodthirsty eyes flashed with a glimmer of light. This was a look of horror. Is this the power of a martialist? Lu Feng's voice was unusually hoarse. The intense pain had already made him lose his voice. At this moment, even the slightest movement would cause him to endure the most painful torment of the legendary 18 levels of hell. Upon seeing Lu Feng's current state, that martialist's eyes flashed with a trace of admiration and shock. Although he already knew that Lu Feng had the bloodline of the Divine King. So what? The bloodline of the Divine King represented an aptitude that surpassed all living beings. However, at this moment, what Lu Feng displayed wasn't just his terrifying aptitude, but also his terrifying willpower. He knew that under such pain, he wouldn't even be able to hold on for a minute, let alone speak. However, Lu Feng had done it. Furthermore, not only had he done it, but he had also been able to unleash such a blow. Terrifying tenacity, shocking willpower, and perfect aptitude. I believe that if you don't die this time, there will definitely be a place for you among the Federation's pinnacle powerhouses in the future. Furthermore, you will definitely be able to reach the pinnacle of the younger generation and become the 8th young emperor among the 7 empresses. You will be a new emperor who will surpass them. Perhaps I should let you off for the sake of the Federation and the human race. Hearing this, Mu Shuiyan's lifeless eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of light. However, following that martialist's words, the last bit of light turned into intense hatred. It was a great hatred that couldn't be erased by anything. However, you'll always be my enemy. As for me, I'm already destined to fall on this path. Since that's the case, having a genius like you die with me might be the best ending for me. Chapter 102. He laughed, a maniacal laugh. In the next moment, the warrior stretched out his arm once again. Then, he took out something that looked like a piece of paper from his bosom. Then, a nameless flame appeared and burned the paper completely, turning it into ashes. The moment the paper turned into ashes, an inexplicable aura appeared and spread in an instant. In a moment, it covered a radius of 100 meters, 1,000 meters, 10,000 meters, 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles. Seeing this scene, Mu Shuiyan's eyes flashed with a trace of sadness. She recognized this thing. However, Mu Shuiyan did not understand how such a precious thing could be in the hands of a warrior. Even in her family, this kind of paper was very rare. It was usually in the hands of those super existences. But why would an ordinary warrior like him have it? I'm afraid, Han, you would never have thought of this, even if he died. The final use of this talisman that he gave me was to help destroy his Han family. Li Tianlai, unless you are a god, you will never be able to sense the situation here in the center of Honglan City. Talisman, that thing that looked like a piece of paper, was a talisman. It was something that the Federation had discovered a long time ago in the great civilizations of the past. Different talismans had different functions. The function of this talisman was to isolate all auras. Within the range that it covered, even if heaven and earth were to be destroyed, no aura would be transmitted out. Mu Shuiyan knew that this warrior was right. Unless their principal, Li Tianlai, was a god, he would not be able to sense everything that was happening here, even if he was close at hand. At this moment, Mu Shuiyan no longer had any illusions after everything was done. The warrior quietly looked at Lu Feng as if he was looking at an exquisite sculpture. He clicked his tongue a few times and said, "You should have seen it. There's an absolutely insurmountable gap between a warrior and a warrior. Even if you are a genius, even if you can ignite an endless amount of blood and jump an entire level from a mid-level warrior to a high-level warrior. But so what? Your strength is only SOSO in the end. Even an all-out attack was no match for a casual wave of my hand. Therefore, you shall perish." The moment he finished speaking, the martialist suddenly threw a punch in Lu Feng's direction. This was an indescribable punch. At this moment, in the eyes of Lu Feng and Mu Shuiyan, such an attack could be described as peerless and invincible. Powerful. Compared to Lu Feng's attack, it was much, much stronger. The punch had actually triggered the existence of number 1 middle school's general momentum, causing the entire earth and sky to tremble slightly. In the next instant, it shattered into nothingness. Everything within tens of thousands of meters behind Lu Feng had completely disappeared. This was the power of a martial artist. Smoke and dust filled the sky, and no color could be seen. The entire sky turned gray, as if it was the end of the world, the end of all life. Looking at the misty scene in front of him, the crazy flames in the martialist's eyes gradually extinguished and were replaced by a kind of pleasure. Although that punch wasn't his all-out attack, it was already mixed with his true strength. That was a martial artist attack that used the power of heaven and earth. He was confident that under such an attack, even a medium-sized warship would be smashed to pieces. No warrior would ever be able to survive. He laughed a maniacal laugh. "Han Feng, you idiot. For a woman, you don't care about anything and sent me to my death. Since that's the case, then you and your family will follow me to hell." Ha ha, ha. Endless laughter reverberated in this annihilated space. It was so ear-piercing, so sinister. This was an incomparably huge planet, a place where countless human beings lived. On it, there were traces of all kinds of technology. However, in the center of this planet, there was a cluster of ancient buildings. Dozens of ancient, towering palaces stood quietly in the center of hundreds of millions of buildings. They had experienced the vicissitudes of life, desolation, and antiquity, but they were filled with endless majesty and terror. Silence, peace, majesty, and simplicity were supposed to be the witnesses of this place. However, everything changed in an instant. In an incomparably ancient palace, a voice rang out, shaking everything and reverberating throughout this incomparably huge ancient planet. "Who dares to provoke the bloodline of the royal family?" A figure appeared and slowly walked out of the ancient palace. No one could see his face clearly, and they couldn't even distinguish his exact appearance. As he walked, the entire world shook and trembled. At the next moment, he walked up to the sky dome, and it was at this moment that a crack that stretched across the entire horizon was completely opened up. Countless people watched as the figure walked into the crack, and all of them knelt respectfully on the ground, shouting, "Farewell, Patriarch." At the same time, on an equally huge planet, a terrifying figure did the same thing. He transformed into an invincible figure, like a 10,000 zhang tall giant. With a casual punch, he actually punched through the starry sky. A moment later, he stepped directly into the crack. The moment the giant left, a beautiful figure walked into the void. She looked at the departing giant with a trace of terrifying fluctuation and anger in her eyes. In the next moment, she waved her hand casually and formed a terrifying light beam that resembled space-time turbulence. When the light beam hit the void, an exceptionally beautiful space-time crack also appeared. Then, her figure disappeared into the crack. Seeing the disappearance of the two existences, many people who struggled to climb out of the shattered buildings below looked at each other in dismay. Their faces were filled with a kind of emotion called panic. No one would have thought that the two technicians who spent all their time together were actually such terrifying powerhouses. What a pity. Even if your peerless talent is enough to shock the world, you still turn into ashes in the end. If there is an afterlife, you must remember, there is an insurmountable gap between a warrior and a warrior. Don't try to use the body of a warrior to challenge a warrior who has comprehended the power of heaven and earth. However, for you to be able to unleash your most powerful attack before you die, you should be able to die without any regrets. Looking at the gradually clear annihilation space, the warrior turned around and walked out. Everything seemed to be about to stop. Everything seemed to be about to come to an end. However, at this moment, in the next instant, a voice pierced through the endless annihilation. Who said that? That is my strongest attack. His footsteps stopped instantly. His body swayed slightly, as if in disbelief. In the next moment, the warrior turned around with difficulty and looked at the chaotic space. Once again, he returned to his original position. At this moment, the smoke and dust that filled the sky finally settled down. The truth of everything was finally revealed. Looking at everything in the deep hole that was more than 100 meters deep and 10,000 meters long, everyone's expression froze instantly. A trace of disbelief flashed in their eyes. In the end, the warrior did not say a word, because he found it hard to believe what he was seeing. How is this possible? How is this possible? To him, this was impossible, absolutely impossible. However, even if he did not want to believe it, even if he could not believe it, everything was really like this. Everything had really happened. Lu Feng, who was in the deep pit, took one step after another. It was difficult for him to move forward. With every step, the countless wounds on his body healed. With every step he took, his face was strangely distorted. Although he did not experience it personally, just by looking at it, he could still feel the incomparable pain. Lu Feng did not die. He had once again appeared and stood in front of his enemy. In the deep hole, besides Lu Feng, who was still walking continuously, the warrior also saw a sparkling light screen. On the screen of light, the young girl that Han Feng wanted was also sitting there unscathed. It was as if she had not been injured in the slightest. Finally, with the last step, Lu Feng returned to the ground. At this moment, the terrible injuries from before were actually healed without a trace. Is this the horror of a bloodline? Is this the pinnacle of the divine king's bloodline? After suffering such a heavy blow, he had actually recovered completely in such a short time. Was this the power of the divine king's bloodline? At this moment, the warrior finally understood why the existence of those gods' descendants was a headache for everyone. Lu Feng did not answer the warrior's question. He just stared coldly at the warrior and spoke softly in a hoarse, trembling voice. Who said that just now? That was my strongest attack. Lu Feng, am not afraid of anything. He moved again. But this time around, compared to Lu Feng, he was way stronger. In an instant, he had actually appeared beside the warrior. This was a strange movement technique. Although there was no increase in power, this speed was still a headache. This kind of combat skill was the true essence of the cultivation method that he had comprehended from the wind follows the shadow in the virtual battle space. Although it could not increase Lu Feng's strength in the slightest, it could greatly increase his speed. Lu Feng appeared behind the warrior and threw a punch. It was full of berserk power. This attack had been learned from air burst. Similarly, due to the difference in level, there was no enhancement effect. However, when the violent power was placed on Lu Feng's body, it was vividly reflected by the enhancement of his physical body. Chapter 103. He threw out a punch, disrupting the space. The next moment, the warrior was sent flying hundreds of meters into the air. At this time, Lu Feng moved again. A strange body movement appeared, but this time, there was no violent blow. Instead, there was a kind of feminine aura. The true essence of lines was vividly embodied by Lu Feng at this moment. Countless essence of combat skills were practiced by him one by one, and they were perfectly displayed by him. At this moment, the warrior was still in shock. He did not react, and was directly stunned by Lu Feng's strange series of attacks. In another instant, Lu Feng's fists turned into palms. Countless palm techniques with boundless killing intent appeared one after another, bombarding the martialist's body continuously. This was the essence of waves in the sea of clouds. At this moment, Lu Feng completely evolved it again. At this moment, Lu Feng exceeded his own limits and struck out countless killing power. Behind each kind was the embodiment of the essence of his combat skills. Lu Feng had already used all the essence of his combat skills, and he was constantly using them. After being attacked hundreds of times in a row, the warrior finally reacted. With just a casual slap, Lu Feng's previous advantage disappeared in an instant. He, who rushed into the air with the help of a strong force, was directly sent flying by the warrior's subsequent attack and hit the ground. Dust splashed and smoke filled the sky. Feeling the injury in his body, the warrior's eyes flashed with horror and disbelief again. He did not understand why Lu Feng could attack him in such a strange way. Although he was shocked by Lu Feng's terrifying recovery power after waking up from the horrible killing, he was temporarily absent-minded. But this absent-mindedness was not a flaw for a warrior. The warrior was confident that if it was any other advanced warrior, even if it was a peak advanced warrior who also had the bloodline of God, it was absolutely impossible for them to injure him to such an extent without any enhancement. He gently wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The madness in his eyes appeared again. The warrior looked at Lu Feng with a condensed expression, which eventually turned into the strongest killing intent. Good, very good. You can actually injure me like this. As an intermediate warrior, even among the advanced warriors of the Divine King's bloodline, you are the first one. I believe that except for you, there is no other genius with the bloodline of God who can do this. You can really do it. He struggled to climb out of the deep pit. The injuries on his body slowly disappeared, but Lu Feng did not feel any joy about this. He could feel that although his body had recovered, the damage caused by the power of his bloodline had deepened countless times. Faintly, his body was about to reach its limit. Lu Feng understood that if it wasn't for the blessing of the Bronze Fiend and the Fiend true physique, he would have died long ago. But even so, he had already reached his limit. He couldn't withstand a few more hits like this. It's not over yet. Tremble, tremble, tremble. This series of attacks had caused Lu Feng to suffer too much damage, and the pain he had to endure was indescribable. Even if his will was as strong as steel, under such a long period of torment, Lu Feng was about to collapse. This time, Lu Feng was extremely grateful for the 4 months he had wasted. The illusion of 9 lives had forged his incomparable will, allowing him to endure endless pain. Moreover, the countless battles in the Dreamland had given him a fighting will that surpassed any other kind of fighting spirit. It could be said that if it were not for the test and experience of the 9 lives, Lu Feng might really be like what the warrior said. Even if he took advantage of the warrior's momentary absent-mindedness, it would be impossible for him to cause such great damage. Hearing Lu Feng's voice, the warrior was angry. At this moment, he had forgotten everything. The only thing that existed was killing. No matter what, he wanted to completely obliterate this warrior who had challenged the warrior's honor. The power of heaven and earth was turbulent, and the strongest killing began to appear. In an instant, the warrior rushed towards Lu Feng to kill. A cultivation technique appeared. It was a star-level cultivation technique. This warrior had comprehended a cultivation technique and even a star-level cultivation technique. Lu Feng knew that as long as he was touched, he would be severely injured. After all, the power of heaven and earth was too destructive. So, even if he could not bear the pain of moving around casually, Lu Feng still fought. Now, he had only comprehended 3 cultivation techniques: billowing clouds, literary slaughter, and his exclusive cultivation technique, supremacy. Among them, the strength of supremacy was far beyond the other 2 cultivation techniques. Even so, the help that zoned only provided to him was negligible. After all, although supremacy had smelted the essence of 100 kinds of combat skills, Lu Feng had not had time to condense them into a perfect combat skill essence. So, supremacy was still a beginner cultivation technique. In an instant, he had already fought hundreds of times. Perhaps the power of blood alone was not enough for Lu Feng to collide with a warrior in the evolution stage, but with the existence of diabolic true body and bronze great demon body, he already had some capital to contend. Again and again, everywhere he was suppressed. Vaguely, Lu Feng was getting more and more dangerous. But this was still very amazing, because if it were anyone else, they would have been casually hit by the warrior and turned into dust in the moment of the fight. Lu Feng understood that in less than a dozen moves, he would be completely defeated and killed. Now, All the trump cards that could be used were used. Lu Feng was at his wit's end. Finally, after being hit again, when he climbed up from the ground, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a shocking light. He finally thought of it. He finally thought of it. He still had a trump card, in one last way. The supreme technique. The supreme technique of supremacy. Supremacy. But in the next moment, the light of excitement was extinguished again, because Lu Feng thought that supremacy was still a beginner-level technique, and the derived supreme technique only belonged to the beginner-level technique realm. Even if he used it, it would not give him much of an increase. But after a moment, Lu Feng thought of it again. He finally thought of a last resort in the desperate moment of battle. Lu Feng's fighting spirit was reignited. He was burning everything. He had already blocked everything. But this was his last hope. If he still failed, then he would really be defeated. Without the need for the warrior to make a move, he would be completely dead. Once again, using the powerful force to rush into the void, Lu Feng's movements became faster and faster. In a blur, the essence of every kind of battle technique was actually blooming in his hands. A powerful explosion occurred again, and it actually made the group of warriors take a step back for a short time. This was the first step that the warriors took since the two sides fought at full strength, and it was also the only step until now. Gradually, Lu Feng's attacks became crazier and crazier. He even forgot about life and death, and forgot about danger. He had been hit several times, and this had already exceeded Lu Feng's limit. But he still did not stop, not even for a short pause. It was still that endless madness. The essence of the battle techniques contained in the massacre became fewer and fewer, and it became less and less strange. And when Lu Feng's attacks almost no longer contained any essence of the battle techniques, the venerable warrior finally realized. At this moment, a look of horror appeared on his face. But it was all too late, because by the time he realized it, Lu Feng had already succeeded in the battle. He sharpened his will, and in the battle, he condensed his own technique. Lu Feng did the craziest thing. However, he had succeeded. The moment the last essence of the battle techniques disappeared, there was only a strange feeling. That was a move with hundreds of essence changes and hundreds of techniques flashing. Lu Feng, in this madness, actually melted the hundreds of essence of the battle techniques into one and forged the essence of the battle techniques that belonged to him. And this meant one thing. Lu Feng actually made his exclusive technique, Soul Honored, evolve. It was at this moment of distraction, that Lu Feng finally poured everything into it. The evolution of Soul Honored and the derived supreme technique Soul Honored also succeeded in becoming a supreme technique of the intermediate level. Although he relied on the power of the bloodline to transform into a high-level warrior, Lu Feng's true level was always that of a mid-level warrior. Therefore, the enhancement of the intermediate level technique was still effective even after he became a high-level warrior. This was the horror of the god's bloodline. Extreme, at the last moment, all the light in Lu Feng's eyes became solid. His arms trembled, and his will condensed. After pouring everything into it, Lu Feng finally broke out completely. Great demon true body, blood boiling, supreme technique, Soul Honored. Sitting at the bottom of the deep valley, Mu Shuyan had been watching Lu Feng's battle. She watched him swing his fists, watched him endure billions of years of pain, watched him fight unyieldingly, watched him create a miracle that surpassed anything else. In the end, tears gently rolled down his cheeks. The restriction on his body had already been removed when the guardian crystal had shattered. At this moment, Mu Shuyan looked at the endless brilliance in the sky, looked at the strongest killing that surpassed anything else, and forgot everything else. She knew that Lu Feng had won. She knew that Lu Feng had lost. Lu Feng had won the battle that he gambled everything on, but he had also lost his life. He had finally fallen. Chapter 104. All the pain was slowly fading away, and all the feelings were fading away. At the last moment, Lu Feng looked at the warrior's frightened face and watched him gradually turn into nothingness, fade, and finally disappear. Lu Feng smiled. He knew that he had finally won, even though he had reached his limit and was about to die in the next moment. However, Lu Feng didn't regret what he had done. He was just a little unwilling. He was unwilling to die like this. He wasn't willing to die like this. He wasn't willing to die like this. He wasn't willing to reach the peak. He wasn't able to fulfill so many of his wishes. Everything can only be like this. At this moment, Lu Feng slowly closed his eyes. In a daze, he seemed to see a huge crack in the sky. He saw the two figures of his loved ones slowly appear at the other end of the crack. The cymbidium was boiling. In a daze, an indescribably powerful force descended. It tore through the infinite void and broke open the boundless chaos. At this moment, all the humans and living creatures on the cymbidium felt the descent of an extremely majestic force. Countless living creatures crawled and trembled. Many experts were shocked, but they couldn't summon up any will to resist. At this moment, the same word appeared in the minds of those powerhouses at the same time. God had descended. In the principal's office of the Federal University, Li Tianlai's expression was extremely ugly. His gaze was distant, as if he could see through the infinite space and time. At this moment, even his body was trembling slightly. Ordinary experts wouldn't understand. However, as a half-step god who had comprehended divine power, Li Tianlai was extremely clear. This kind of fluctuation definitely didn't belong to an ordinary god, because under this kind of power, he started to tremble endlessly. After all, Li Tianlai was an existence who had comprehended divine power. As long as he broke through the soul shackles, he would ignite the godly fire, condense a godly position, and become a true god. He wasn't afraid of ordinary gods. As for those divine martial artists who had just stepped into the divine realm, he, who had comprehended divine power, could even kill gods by relying on his Psyche Master's cultivation method and his trump card. But now, just under this kind of aura, he was trembling. Not to mention fighting, he didn't even have the slightest bit of resistance in his heart. Could an existence that had descended be an ordinary god? Damn it! Li Tianlai took a deep breath. He didn't know why an existence that was at least a true god would suddenly descend on the cymbidium. However, he knew that the cymbidium contained his hope. Therefore, he couldn't let this planet be destroyed. In the next moment, Li Tianlai's aura surged. He barely managed to move under this kind of aura. Ignoring the changes in the school, Li Tianlai forcibly maintained the enormous aura and directly flew out of the cymbidium into the endless void of the universe. Tao, can you still feel Xiaofeng's existence? The beautiful woman emitted a shocking, murderous intent. Her mere existence caused the entire void of the universe to tremble. No one doubted that this woman could destroy a part of the sky with just a raise of her hand. It was enough to turn a planet with life into nothingness. Hearing the woman's words, a trace of madness, a trace of bloodlust, and a faint trace of fear appeared on the man's elegant face. He closed his eyes. In the next moment, boundless consciousness began to spread out, disturbing all movements in the entire space. Even the operation of the cymbidium was disrupted. Powerful, terrifying, extremely powerful. Found it. The moment his voice landed, he took a light step forward and crossed an immeasurable distance, disappearing into the void of the universe. The next place he appeared was in the red orchid forest on the outskirts of Honglan City. Looking at the endless destruction below and feeling the remnant aura of destruction, the man's expression became even more terrifying and ugly. He took another step forward and arrived at the deepest part of the endless pit. There, a figure lay quietly at the bottom, or rather, it could no longer be called a figure. Although it was still intact, it gave off an extremely terrifying feeling. Everyone who saw it couldn't help but think of a word: fragmented. After experiencing the last violent blow, Lu Feng had used the power of Du Zun to the limit. At this moment, the power of the great demon's true essence, which belonged to the endless space and time, had been completely exhausted. After being severely injured by the warrior, the damage from the collision of endless destruction, and the cruel aftereffects of the supreme law, the flame of Lu Feng's life had been extinguished. In everyone's opinion, he was already a dead existence. The woman trembled as she walked to Lu Feng's side. She didn't care about the white clothes on her body as she gently hugged Lu Feng in her arms. Her clothes were soaked in blood, but the woman had already forgotten about all this. In her eyes, there was only the corpse whose flame of life had been extinguished and the face that had been completely destroyed. Tears fell silently and stained the ground. The despair and sorrow she felt at this moment was indescribable. Didn't you say that Xiaofeng's safety was foolproof? Why? Why him? Why him? The woman's voice was mournful, and a boundless aura erupted at this moment. In an instant, the red orchid forest with a radius of nearly 10,000 square kilometers collapsed, and all the trees were uprooted. The once famous natural scenery of the Cymbidium became a thing of the past in an instant. This was an aura. Just a little bit of her anger had actually caused such a miraculous effect. However, in the face of this, the woman didn't seem the slightest bit out of the ordinary. At this moment, she glared hatefully at the sorrowful man in front of her. Hearing the woman's accusation, the man fell silent. After a moment, he said with great difficulty, "Chenwei, I really didn't know things would turn out this way. Before I left my mark on Xiaofeng's body. However, that mark was activated on Gufang's star. At that time, we were at a critical point in our research, so I didn't have time to replenish it. So, seeing the man's sorrowful and regretful expression, the woman didn't appreciate it all. Her expression became even colder, and even her voice carried a trace of coldness. So what? F***CK, the experiment. What bullsh**T experiment? Isn't it just to help you make up for your regrets and help you break through the shackles? In my heart, Xiaofeng is irreplaceable. He is the most important. So what if you break through? Can you return Xiaofeng to me? Can you bring him back to life? Lu Tao, aren't you known as the #1 emperor of the younger generation? Aren't you known as the #1 demon among the billions of races in the universe? Why can't you even guarantee the safety of your own child? What kind of emperor are you? What kind of demon are you? You God, who do you think you are? The woman's voice became even more mournful. She seemed to be faintly losing control. The entire space began to tremble, and the boundless earth began to tremble. Amidst the haze, the Cymbidium began to change, and there were actually traces of cracks. Sensing everything around him, Lu Tao didn't say or do anything. In the eyes of gods like them, even the destruction of billions of living beings couldn't shake their state of mind. If destroying billions of living beings could bring Lu Feng back to life, then Lu Tao would be willing to do it. It was a pity that he missed out on everything just like that. The two of them fell silent. It was so quiet that it was unbearable. Finally, with the appearance of a figure, this kind of atmosphere was slowly broken. The person who had arrived was the current #1 powerhouse of the Cymbidium, the principal of the Federal University, Li Tianlai. Li Tianlai didn't have any strange expression when he saw everything before him. After all, he only needed to use a simple telekinesis technique to cause such destruction. However, the two silent people in front of him made Li Tianlai feel a sense of panic. If this had been any other place, perhaps Li Tianlai would have turned around and left. After all, the man and woman in front of him were clearly on the verge of going berserk. Li Tianlai didn't have the guts to provoke these two terrifying gods, who might have already surpassed ordinary gods. However, he couldn't do that here. This was because the Honglan star had already carried too many things for him. After a brief glance, Li Tianlai saw the deep pit, the corpse in the woman's arms, and Mu Xun, who was protected by a sparkling light curtain. Until now, he still didn't know what had happened. However, no matter what had happened, it had already happened. Therefore, what he had to do now was to stop the tragedy from continuing. Li Tianlai gritted his teeth slightly, took a deep breath, and said very carefully, "The two of you, this is the Cymbidium, a third-class life planet controlled by the Federation. If the two of you have any conflicts, please resolve them in the void of the universe. Hearing this, Lu Tao and the woman didn't react at all. They still had the same expression as before, without any change. Seeing this scene, Li Tianlai's face flushed slightly. Who was he? He was a peerless genius in the Federation, an existence that was close to becoming a god. Even on the capital administrative planet of the Federation, he had an extremely high status. His teacher was a famous celestial master in the Federation, an existence that even the leaders of the Federation had to pay respect to. However, here he was blatantly ignored. Li Tianlai hadn't experienced this kind of feeling for many years. Finally, after taking another deep breath, Li Tianlai slightly emphasized his tone. I'm Li Tianlai from the Federal University. This is a life planet controlled by the Federation. I hope the two of you will pay attention to your identities. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.